I still think the story's to be written here, Johnny. To be honest, the night time is nearly over. That's another little waypoint, really, isn't it, for all of these teams to check off their list. But as our Porsche keys to the race said some 15 and a half hours ago, it's what happens in the last 3.5 hours that really counts.
Completely. And you know you can legislate for being a certain amount in the lead by a certain hour, but all you need is the caution, and then the button, the reset button is pressed, and that's your strategy right down the pan. And you've got to deal with it. I appreciate this race in chunks, but you can't think too far ahead. It's not like other races that offer a code 60, for example, rather than the full reset. Yes, okay, laps ahead is good. I mean, if you can get laps ahead of your rivals, then they can only ever gain one lap back at a time. And just ask Mazda about that. When they fell 3 laps down, it's now just 2 to the race leader, who is Renger van der Zande. Oliver Jarvis hasn't lost faith, nor have anybody at Mazda Motorsports, with Joest looking after matters there. Lena Gade calling the shots. She's no doubt been in this situation before. You don't focus too hard on exactly where you are right now, because it's where you are in 8 hours and 40 minutes. And in 1 second, bang, we are now at the end of another clock hour. So 7 a.m. at Daytona, the hint of daylight appearing in the sky, and particularly as the cars head through Speedway Turn 1, they are really getting a big dose of sunlight now in their eyes. That Florida sunshine, which is unmistakable. 2 classic moments for photographers and fans alike at this racetrack, when the sun goes down and when the sun starts to rise as the 31 leaps over the first bit of the bus stop chicane. It's got Mike Conway at the wheel, by the way, in his Wheel & Engineering Cadillac. Renger van der Zande leads the race by just under 5 seconds from AJ Allmendinger for Meyer Shank Racing. That's the better of the 2 Acuras currently, but only by 3-4 seconds. The 2 Acuras are pretty close to one another, actually. Separate entities, of course, one from Meyer Shank Racing with Curb Agajanian, the other from Konica Minolta Acura. Helio Castroneves, Brazilian driver, piloting the number 10 in 4th position. Kamui Kobayashi is at the wheel of the Ally Cadillac Racing DPI. That car's 5th, and it's the 48 machine, also with 512 laps completed. And then the slightly larger gap back to Oliver Jarvis, as I say. 4 LMP2s. Now, for a long time leading up to midnight and slightly beyond that, I think there was something like 7 LMP2s all locked together in combat. So 1 or 2 have dropped away, 1 or 2 have hit problems, the notorious problems at Daytona. So Gabby Aubrey for Tower Motorsport still well and truly in the hunt, and actually leading, as displayed on my timing screen, by a lap currently. We're waiting for Pauline Chatin to cross the line again to confirm that, but I think the way this timing system is configured, it is a lap between Tower Motorsport and Era Motorsport, with the Dragon Speed machine of Devlin Di Francesco, 82, currently in 3rd place. And then it's the RWR Eurasia Ligier, and that has Sven Muller driving in this tricky transitional stint between day and night. Connor Di Filippi is piloting the GTLM leading car, which is now a BMW. Remember that for many hours it was a Corvette 1-2. They're not far away from that red BMW, the 25, with Tonio Garcia just 2 seconds adrift and Tommy Milner a second away. So Corvette very much still in the fight, as is James Calado's Risi Competizione Ferrari. Marco Wittmann dealing with a larger gap of 1.25 minutes back to the 5th placed car. And you know, Kevin Estre has been working very hard to gather all of that lost pace back again, lost position back again. He was down 37th overall a number of hours ago, now back up to 18th place, and all that stands in his way between the nose of his Porsche. At the back of Marco Wittmann's BMW are two prototype cars. Mac Bell's LMP2 Win Autosport Oreca and the LMP3 of Spencer Pigot in the 74 Riley Motorsports car. So that's a tremendous run for WeatherTech Racing and their Porsche 911 RSR 19. They have kept out of trouble after a trying opening few hours and finally getting some reward. They are laps down, and to give you an indication, it is around about 10 compared to the GTLM leader. Exactly 10 according to that graphic, in fact. But psychologically, to be as close as they are to GTLM, I think that's meaningful, just to know that they are steadily climbing the path. And it doesn't take a lot to lose 10 laps if you hit a drama, if you're one of the 5 cars that is in the mix in GTLM. In GT Daytona, Philip Ellis for Winward Racing, the Mercedes number 57 leads that class from Matteo Cressoni in the AF Corsa Ferrari number 21, and Raffaele Marciello for Sun Energy 1 Mercedes is running in the number 3rd spot, by the way. So, you're tuned to RS2, IMSA Radio, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. It will be Joe Bradley joining me very, very shortly as part of the VP Racing Fuels Pit and Paddock reports. But before we head to Joe, I'm delighted to say that on the line we can chat to Christina Nielsen, I believe. Aha, you are there. Brilliant. Sorry, I was sounding pretty doubtful there because I wasn't sure that all the technicals were in line. But you are here. Fantastic. How are you, Christina? Because we're getting to one of those really important psychological points in the race. Sunrise, we're nowhere near there, but you've done well to get this far, I feel, as a team, as a driver, to get to Sunrise is a big step.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, the diffuser came loose here in my final stint. So it's causing a bit of issues about halfway through. So, you know, we're trying to get the drive time done because it fitted with the with finishing that stint. So, yeah, basically just bringing it home, and the guys were fixing it in the pit, and then Cat jumped in. So, you know, we're still there, but we did have our first challenge. But yeah, what can I say? Luckily, there's still quite a few hours left. So we're still staying hopeful.
That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you can look at the timing screen at this point in the race and feel, yeah, we want to be a little closer to the top 10, for example. But I mean, I've been saying this about the Mazda crew in DPI as well. They lost, I think, 3 laps with 8 or 9 hours gone. But you have to concentrate on this one particular stint, this one particular lap, in fact, because you never know when the next caution is going to come out, and an opportunity to gain a bagload of time back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, focus on the things that are within your control, right?
That's it. Control the controllables is the famous phrase, regardless of what sport you're playing. Tell me about this initiative this year, then, attacking the race with a Porsche. I mean, in more recent years, I've associated you with, I think, other manufacturers within GT Daytona. You've raced Porsches before?
Yes, yeah, I've raced quite a few of the manufacturers now that's available in GTD. But yes, I did race the previous generation of the GT3R with Wright Motorsport back in 2018. It was an enjoyable experience, not with them, but you know, unfortunately we had an off on the summation lap. So we starting the race from the pits basically, and got back on track like an hour and a half, 2 hours after, and was completing the 22 hours of Daytona at that point for us.
But you're in quite a good position, therefore, to comment on the ins and outs, the intricacies of quite a lot of the GT Daytona cars in the class. I was mentioning earlier on that a lot of the time in World Motorsport, even if a category is open, then it may tend to just veer toward one particular manufacturer. But GT Daytona never seems to do that. We've got this amazing spread of different cars, and you take a snapshot of the top 5 or 6 in GT Daytona, and very often it involves 5 or 6 different manufacturers. Is that the organisers doing something very right in terms of the balance of performance and making it fair for all?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Of course, there's always this talk about DOT and balance performance and doing all the prep work. I think the series does a great job, but I think it's also about creating, big international events that are on people's bucket list that they want to come and do. And I would say Daytona is absolutely one of those kind of races. And I think, the competition level is really high. It's, acknowledged among the manufacturers, among pro competitors. Like, this is a place that you want to be. You want to be in the championship, and you want to be competing. And that naturally attracts, so many different brands and people from all over the world, I would say.
Tell me how Cat is, because I was due at the start of 2020 to call the debut season back in Europe, European Le Mans series. As I'm sure you know, the test weekend for Paul Ricard did not go well at all for her. Pretty much put her out for the season. It's brilliant to have her back racing again in 2021. It's been a long road to recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there was a year to sit out, I guess last year was the worst one.
That's
with
true,
all the
yes.
circumstances, but yeah, if we got to have the glass half full. But no, I mean, Kat and I have been spending a lot of hours on the phone and, trying just to do everything that we could to put something together for 2021. This deal with Hardpoint and EBM came together rather late, thanks to VB Biocare and Richard Mill. So really grateful to have them on board and being a part of this effort and being a part of showing that, IMSA has diversity and are supportive of, creating an equal playing field for both men and women. So very excited about that, and I very much hope that we can continue it after Daytona. And, we don't want to repeat last year where we just did Daytona. We would like to be back full season, absolutely.
And are we close to being able to announce your plan for the rest of the year? Things presumably are up in the air right now, but the calendar has been obviously released by IMSA, and I guess you guys are working very, very hard behind the scenes to make sure you can do as many races as possible.
I'm going to say yes, we are. And that's about it, what I can share right now. But we're feeling confident and hopeful for the future moving forward.
And is the idea that you and Kat will stick together for as many races as possible, then, as a twosome, and then you will invite others along when necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think both her and I have built up a nice friendship besides the track as well. But, on the other hand, it's also a part of showing something that hasn't been done before. I mean, both Kat and I have had a go at the championship. I won it together with Alessandra Balzan back in 16 and 17. She was fighting for the championship in 18. And, we've both done it with male drivers, and we would love to do it as a female duo as well.
I mean, something that's happening in the World Endurance Championship for 2021 is that, fingers crossed, we'll have two driver lineups that are all female. The Richard Mille Racing crew of Tatiana Calderon, Sofia Flörsch and Beitske Visser for LMP2. And the same goes in GTE AM with stepping up. Rahel Frey, Michelle Gatting and Manuela Gosler, who have done ELMS campaigns and now move into the WEC. I mean, I'm a man, right? But it's important. On one hand, it's important not to focus on it because the timing screen cannot tell the difference in genders. The other hand, you've got 5, 6, 7-year-old girls perhaps at the moment thinking, I can't go into motorsport because it's all men in there. And it needs people like you to tell the younger kids that is not the way we want to carry things on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the whole purpose of it, right? On one hand, it's about creating awareness, but also being a part of action being taken and steps moving towards creating more opportunities for women within the sport. And, I think the nice thing about racing is that, while we as drivers get more of the glory, there's a bunch of people on the team that are part of creating the results that are, done together. And, the girls can hopefully one day look up to both if they want to be a driver, if they want to be a team manager, a mechanic, an engineer. there's plenty of roles that are still quite male-dominated within the world of motorsport, where I would love to see more females stepping up and taking those roles.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Brilliant. Thank you, Christina, for taking the time out to chatting to us. And okay, timing screen tells us you are in 13th right now, but very much in touch with the next batch of cars. And let's hope after the recent hiccup that you can get some solid running in for the next few hours.
Yeah, we're crossing fingers for some yellows, something that'll help us get back in the game.
I'm sure. Excellent. Thank you so much. Christina Nielsen joining us here on RS2 IMSA Radio, part of the Team Hardpoint EBM outfit. Earl Bamber, of course, the EBM within that, and juggling the driver and the team manager role in car 88. So Christina Nielsen, Catherine Legg, Rob Ferriol, the man we didn't mention, and Earl Bamber represent that quartet. So in a moment or two, rejoining me in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre will be Joe Bradley. That, by the way, was a VP Racing Fuel Pit and Paddock report, and we're grateful to Christina Nielsen for taking a few minutes to tell us all about her race so far. And well timed, actually, because we're now heading to a new set of pit stops for Renger van der Zande in the Cadillac Chip Ganassi Racing DPI, car 01, and the AJ Allmendinger driven Meyershank Acura, car 60, also in. Elliot Castroneves follows suit, and having already made their stops back to the track, Ko Pipo Derani and Kamui Kobayashi for Whelen Engineering and Ally Cadillac, respectively. 7:15 in the morning. Joe Bradley, we're turning up the dimmer dial here steadily, more and more brightness appearing, and just once again one of those real atmospheric parts of the race.
Yeah, very much, Johnny. Good morning. Morning, everybody. At 7 a.m. just ticked by a whole 15 minutes ago, and it's for me, this is one of the major milestones of this race. You've gone through the night, you see the sun coming up. It's the most ambient time of any race, sunset and sunrise, and you've achieved something, and you get the feeling when you see the sun coming up and the ambient temperature kind of starts to rise, you kind of see that finish line just off in the distance. What you've got to then reconsider, and you've got to keep telling yourself, there's a full day's work there. There's just under 8.5 hours still of this race to remain, and it's very much not over. And I'll tell you what, Johnny, that LMP2 battle is very much not over, is it? The Olu Shatan, who's just been in the pits and now rejoined the track, just before that pit stop, he managed to get onto the lead lap of the number 8, the Gabriel Aubrey Tower Motorsport Orica, onto the lead lap with that car, and he's going to be chasing that leading LMP2 down. So I'll keep monitoring that gap and their lap times, because I think that LMP2 battle is hotting up. And, you know, that's not to not consider what's happening out front, because there's a great battle, a game of poker on the front. I know I call it a high-speed game of chess with regards to the DPIs leading this race, and they are just going out and just hitting their marks, putting in those lap times so consistently. It's incredible. And Johnny, are you aware that the 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac has got a damaged fork? And the team are worried about it. It doesn't seem to have affected, or it certainly didn't seem to have affected Mike Conway's lap times. He was lapping very much in the region of the cars around him. I'm just wondering what Pipo Derani's now going to make of that damaged underfloor. It's causing a problem with regards to the car's aero performance and the downforce. So that's another one to keep an eye on, just at the front of the field. We can't talk about the VP ranks up.
No, we'll have plenty of time to do that. I mean, all classes are doing this, but I've noticed it, I think, more so in the DPI division, that they are just bombing over that first curve at the bus stop, and surely, you know, the under tray of the car will be grounding out as they hit that. So you've got punishment there, you've got other curbs as well around the racetrack, but I think that because you're hitting the curb at the bus stop at such high speed and such high velocity as well, maybe that has created an issue. Maybe it's completely unrelated. It's something that maybe the car's run over and picked up a bit of damage there, which has been made steadily worse. But I suppose Pipo Derani then getting some experience of exactly how the thing's driving now. It can be described to him in all manner of ways, probably also by Mike Conway, by his radio messages, but until you feel it at first hand, you won't necessarily know how to drive around the problem. The good news is he does seem to be able to keep pace with those around him, because he's doing about the same sort of lap time as Kamui Kobayashi, who is always a good benchmark, the Japanese. Low 1 minute 37s from Dirani. The second place Acura is just underneath that marker with a 136.9. But there's no indication as yet, Joe, that's holding Pipo Derani back at all. My only worry in that regard is that it may be getting steadily worse, and it's a question of, you know, again, how much are you pushing? I mean, Jeremy mentioned this earlier on. We're still at a phase of a race where you're driving within yourself to a degree. These cars are capable of 1 minute 35s, and well, we had at the very start of the race a 134.6. So bear in mind they're about 2 or 3 seconds off that. There is more time to find as we get to the really crucial hours of the race, but they've got to make sure at the 31 crew that there's some of that car left by that point.
Well, I got that information from the team, and I'm not sure whether that information is kind of now old, and the team at the time that I was sent that were indeed worried about what effect that damage to the underfloor was going to have, because just looking at Mike Conway's lap times and his average lap time from his previous stints, it didn't seem to have that massive effect, and I'm only comparing it with the cars around it. And at the moment, to give you an example, the leader, Renger van der Zande, at the front of the field, 137.2 was his last lap time by, and Durrani's was a 136.4. So up ahead of him, Castroneves 136.9. If anything, he's just within a quick lap in all of the top 5. So it's not really affecting him that much.
Doesn't seem to
and
be.
And maybe that's settled the team's minds.
Well, yeah, and you want to be doing that as much as possible, because they've had a long night already. And we'll be on tenterhooks in case they get a last-minute radio message, maybe at Speedway turn 3 or 4, to say Pipo's got to come in. And with that, I mean, underfloor is not something you're going to access quickly, so that would have to be behind the wall job, surely, to get things straightened out. But the signs are good at the moment. I mean, he's only 0.3 of a second off the back of Dane Cameron, so I think the car's fine. But if you were to repair something like that, it's not a quick job, Joe.
Oh, no, man, that is just going to completely take that car out of contention right now. I would suggest that car's in contention for the win. Certainly a podium position. You try, and this is, I think, what was the dilemma that the Whelen Engineering team had, was they found damage on the floor, would have preferred to have replaced it, because, you know, race engineers and race mechanics, they like a pristine race car, and they like everything to be perfect. Already had a qualifying race, we've already had a week of running where things will have been tinkered and tampered with, settled and resettled. The amount of engineering debriefs that have gone on for hours, in my experience, is no one's business, where the engineer just, you know, they just can't make that decision on, you know, let's just try a different camber, let's just try a different caster, or whatever that might be. So they wouldn't have been happy with it not being absolutely perfect. However, I think the choice that they made was the right one, because if they had decided, no, let's replace that floor, that car would now be way down the field and out of contention. It's not a quick fix, like you said.
And it's, you know, probably better to get more than one driver into the car so that they can offer some assessment and advice. But, you know, so much of a 24-hour race is, as problems develop, learning how to drive around them, working out how much, if any, time you're losing per lap, and then just living with them. It's very hard to simulate a broken car in free practice. I suppose you could do it if you rented a track and did a couple of test days, and then worked out, you know, which bits you can maybe take off the car and say, well, we can live without that, but really that's an integral piece, so that should be replaced. But very similarly to how mechanics simulate broken cars and how to fix them at speed, I suppose it would pay you to work out which of the bits of the car you could safely run with for several hours. And we're still talking a third of the race here. So not a, well, there's never a good time for an issue like the 31 has suffered. But you can hear the engine of the 31 in the background now, right behind an LMP2 car. Oh, and I was just wondering whether we might be able to hear some flappage perhaps, but I think it's more subtle than that, and maybe just the feel of the car's setup that something's not quite right. Down the gears it
will be
goes.
very subtle, Johnny. The design, the aero design on the underneath of these cars are actually more important than what we can see. And there will be subtle differences with regards to, I'm not sure, I didn't get the information as to where they think the floor was damaged. But there is, the floor has been rearranged, let's say. And it's the perfectionist attitude that the engineers, the mechanics have looked at that and thought, well, that floor has been rearranged. That's going to affect our performance. I think that question has been fully answered though, because that car it may lack something somewhere, and the drivers are able to be aware of that. For instance, the car's now got a great turn in, or it's a little bit loose on the throttle application coming out of the infield hairpins. By now they've got their heads around that and they're driving around that issue, and it really shows the caliber and the stature of these drivers. They are the best sports car drivers in the world right now, watching here at Daytona, and it doesn't surprise me that they're able to drive around that issue and have now regained that pace, having identified exactly where the problem is lain from whatever it is that's been rearranged on that car.
And now that Pipo has cleared the LMP2 machine, he's right with Dane Cameron now. So this is a good yardstick. Dane, much earlier on in the race, was given some rather second-rate Michelin tyres, purely because he'd been through one stint already, and he ended up with some second-hand rubber. And it was notable in the lap times that Dane was still pedalling as quickly as he could, but as safely as he could. And again, if you end up with a set of tyres like that, it's really something, once more, that you just have to live with for 30-odd or 20-odd laps in the case of DPI, and then hope that the next time you're in the car, the situation has improved. The 97 Aston Martin stays nice and high and wide at turn 6 to allow the battling DPIs through. Third and fourth positions then for Dane Cameron and Pipo Derani, and for fear of not giving GT, LM and D any love, then let's give you the order there. Speaking of the 97 Aston Martin, I can tell you that's Ben Keating in the TF Sport Aston in another highlighter yellow liveried car. So yet another version of the British Racing Green, you could argue. They used to be in that very deep, traditional British Racing Green colour. Then there was a slightly lighter shade of that adorned the new Vantage, and I would say that's a different colour again for car 97 and TF Sports. Obviously Tom Ferrier deciding to, for the moment, scrap the blood red livery that ran on the number 90 car throughout the World Endurance Championship campaign, won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and we need to get used to this new livery for Ben Keating, the car that he shares with Richard Westbrook, Charlie Eastwood and Maxwell Root. That car is 7th. Ahead of him on the road is the FAF Motorsport Porsche in the plaid colours, so half tartan and half silver. That's the number 9 car, and Matty Campbell, the Australian wizard, is at the wheel of that car, running in 6th. Then it's Jan Halen 5th, also in a Porsche for Wright Motorsports, car 16. In 4th place, Corey Lewis, Paul Miller Racing's Lamborghini Huracan, last year's winners, running just outside the podium spots right now. Raffaele Marciello is in 3rd for Sun Energy 1 in the Mercedes from number 75, metallic blue with the flame effect around the nose. Philip Ellis is driving the Winward Racing Mercedes, car 57 in 2nd, but back to the lead of the class in GT Daytona, Matteo Cressoni. For AF Corsa, that's the 21 entry for the Scarlet Red Ferrari of Cressoni, Simon Mann, Nicholas Nielsen and Daniel Serra. But it's Cressoni who's really impressed me in his stints so far in this race, leading the way by just a second over Philip Ellis And in GTLM, it's still BMW from Corvette and Corvette, less than a second between each of those cars, and you can lump in James Collado as well. Completely nose to tail for Conor Di Filippi, Antonio Garcia, Tommy Milner and James Collado. And it's Marco Wittmann who was very much with them as well until this pit stop for the 24 BMW. The black M8 GTE has just come in to serve its 19th stop. Corvettes were doing better on fewer pit stops, let's say. Their first and second places, as was the case many hours ago, I thought was a reward for pitting on fewer occasions. But then you look at the 25 BMW that's done as many as 21 stops compared to Corvette, who've done 16. And they still have, the BMW still has the race lead, so that logic can't necessarily be followed. And BMW.
It's that GTLM battle, Johnny, just reminds me of those 4 cars are just driving to a fist fight for the last hour.
Oh yeah, completely. It's the same every year, isn't it? It's a smallish class, but always I tend to find the most competitive, Joe.
Absolutely, it's an incredible battle, that, and you can just tell, especially when the stream goes in car and the way that the drivers are driving, they're driving very, very quickly, but they're driving very smoothly. And there's not, if that was a different, if once we get into the last hour, let's say, and especially into the last pit stop kind of stint phase, as the BMW peels off now out of the lead of GTLM, Conor Di Filippi on the pit road. This is a battle that's going to go right to the very end, and into the pits also is the number 4, Tommy Milner, bringing the Corvette. Have we got Farfus in? Yeah, Farfus has been in and gone out. So that means that the number 3 Corvette will inherit the lead of GTLM, and James Collado in the Racing Competizione Ferrari has gone through and will take up that second place. Of course, this will all pan out when we get through this pit stop phase, and we'll see these cars back out. Conor Di Filippi, and it's the Corvette that gets off the pit apron first and will overtake the BMW. BMW a little bit slower in that pit stop, the actual pit stop that took place. So Tommy Milner remaining in the car. Didn't quite see if there was any driver changes there on either of those cars. So Di Filippi stays in the BMW number 25, Tommy Milner in the number 4 Corvette, and it's Milner who has made that move while standing still effectively. He took the pit stop and then moved off first, and it was fuel and tyres on the number 4, no driver change for the Corvette, and it was an absolutely choreographed dance around the car that has gotten that number 4 Corvette. It's the silver liveried car. There's a number 3 car is the usual Corvette yellow. Number 4 that will effectively inherit the lead when we see the 2 cars running at the front of GTLM take their pit stops. It was once again proving that long distance sports car racing, it's all about the team. Number 3 Corvette now in, and the Ferrari of Collado in. Let's see if the 3 Corvette team can do as efficient a job as the number 4 did. Car just taking on fuel, tyres are done. A little bit of rubbish being scooped from the front grille. That will assist in getting the air to that mid-engine. Corvette with the heritage of that mark. It's now mid-engine. Number 3 off the pit apron. But it's going to stay ahead of the Ferrari of the Ricci team. Once again, Corvette Racing showing they are indeed a very solid team. And the GTLM pit stop phase is pretty much over. Farfus is out of sequence currently running 5th in GTLM. Just only 2 minutes behind, but we'll see these cars close up back on the track and see them regain that track position, JP.
Yeah, I noticed as the 3 car headed out again with Antonio Garcia at the wheel, so that wasn't the driver change, was it? I'm trying to remember now whether Jordan Taylor was at the came in, but I think it was Garcia throughout. Davide Rigon has taken charge from James Collado, but I noticed that there's one headlight out on the yellow Corvette, and in Le Mans rules that would need to be fixed, but in the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, particularly as the night section has almost been completed, I think that's less of a drama, and therefore Corvette didn't address that. I was right in my memory, by the way, that it was BMW winning in 2019 and 2020, so they are on a hat-trick. There's been a drama for the 75 Mercedes. It was nice and high up in the standings in GT Daytona. Now that, I believe, is an outlet for Kenny Habul, therefore on cold Michelin tyres, and couldn't get the car stopped into the International Horseshoe, so just had to run out a little bit wide onto the grass there, which has cost him some time and quite possibly a position as well. 3 of the cars, or all 3 of the top 3, have pitted on the same lap there, including the 21 of Simon Mann. So Mann and Habul in on lap 491. Philip Ellis pitting a lap later, 492, for the Winward Mercedes, which therefore leads briefly a lap. Now we've got a battle out on track because the BMW is having more than a little look around the outside of the number 4 car. This is for, at the moment, 3rd position in GTLM, but bear in mind, Antonio Garcia and Tommy Milner have just rejoined the racetrack, and this is quite possibly Connor De Filippi's opportunity to get back in front of the Corvette. He led going into the stops in GTLM. At the moment, looking at least losing at least 1 place. And is that the other Corvette just ahead as well? I believe it is. Yeah. So Corvette 1st and 2nd, and the BMW has suffered a net loss, Jay Bradley, of 2 places, as now there's an Aston Martin off at the bus stop chicane together with a Porsche. I think 2 GT Daytona cars have clashed there on the braking zone on the back straight section.
Yeah, confirm it's the 97 TF Sport Aston Martin. Not sure which car they've had it coming together with. It's into the bus stop chicane on the back straight. It's always a tricky piece of racetrack, especially to share it with anyone. And that's Porsche number 64. Yes, Porsche number 64 there coming together with the 97 TF Sport. And again, shared real estate. Oh, and the Porsche looked like it was, he didn't turn in. He didn't turn into the first apex. Yeah, looked like he was about to straight line. It looks like a bit of damage on the 97. That's going to be make his way to pit. I think both of those cars got away with that very lightly, Johnny. I think that that 97 Aston, from what I could see, didn't look as though it's been affected too much. But getting back to this GTLM battle, Johnny, the reason we've got the Corvettes out there in front of GTLM right now is down to those guys in the pits. They were outstanding, the pit stops that we saw carried out on the number 3 and 4.
Unbelievable, this battling, and that's pure air effect. It was almost as if the 3 car didn't have a final gear to pull there, but I can assure you it's near enough identical to the number 4, and the benefit that the number 4 car had was that massive hole punched in the air by the 3, all of the wind resistance being caught by the leading car at the time, which was Antonio Garcia, and he had little choice but to allow Tommy Milner around the outside. Or was there a clever little bit there of maybe feathering of the throttle, realising that Tommy Milner's got slightly the quicker car in this phase of the race? You allow him to go, try and let him pass, but not the BMW at the same time, and potentially build a gap for the silver Corvette. It was tough to call that, Joe. Meanwhile, the 97 Aston Martin has reached pit road again. A chance to describe it to you from another angle, this time as the cars go into the bus stop from behind those cars. And it was just a missed braking point, I think, for the 64. Yeah. Let me tell you who's driving that. Just no opportunity to turn in, realising, I think, that there was a car to be battling with, but the opportunity to turn in was sadly missed for Ted Giovannis, the man we were hearing from right here on RS2 IMSA Radio earlier on in the broadcast. So Ted sadly had to come into pit road with, I guess, a damaged Porsche, and likewise, at least the 97 was dragging something, probably a part of its splitter, on the ground. So that's going to be looked at by TF Sport. And actually Ben's back in the session now, Ben Keating, back in the race for the 97 car. So I reckon TF Sport have turned that car around pretty quickly.
There's a lot happening at that point, Johnny, into the braking out. It's a very, very high-speed turn-in, and it's a left-right followed by a right-left. And the right-left exit is pretty flat out, so you try to scrub off as little speed as possible. And we saw there, I'm not sure whether that was the Aston trying to go around the outside of the Porsche, or the Porsche down the inside of the Aston, but it's not uncommon to see that. There's nothing out of character there, seeing an incident like that at the bus stop, and hopefully we'll see both of those cars rejoin without too much of a delay. Back to GTLM though, this is a quality fist fight. Do these guys know that there's 8 hours of this to go? Can they keep this up? This is mega.
Of course they do. Of course they do, and of course they can. They do it year in, year out. And Corvette, after such a strong championship year in 2020 with a brand new car, let's not forget, look like they're going to continue in this championship where they left off at the back end of the previous season. But BMW very much taking the fight to the well-known American brand. So you've got the German BMW squad, the Corvette crew very much from the USA, and then the Ferrari of Italy, represented by American squad Risi Competizione. Porsche are there as well, okay, not with the factory cars, but there is an ex-factory Porsche in the hands of WeatherTech Racing as well. And yeah, get used to this, because it will be this frenetic, I get the feeling, all the way to the flag. We're moments away from the 16th hour being completed. You're tuned to IMSA Radio, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. Remember, you can get in touch using the handle @IMSA Radio and the hashtag R24 Radio, R24 Radio. Joe Bradley and myself, Johnny Palmer, in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. It is time, therefore, for a racing update, a Mazda in-race update, which sees Renger van der Zande in the Cadillac DPI lead on 535 laps by 4.7 seconds over Elio Castroneves in the best of a couple of Acuras. The first from Konica Minolta Acura, car number 10 running in second, and 3 seconds adrift is the Meyershank Racing example with Kerb Agajanian and the Dane Cameron car number 63rd. Then, just a couple of feet away, really, from the tail of that Acura is the next of the Cadillacs, Pipa Dirani in the Whelen Engineering number 31. Damaged floor or not, that's going very strongly. Allied Cadillac Racing represented by the 48 car of Kamui Kobayashi. And then a couple of laps down from the DPI leaders, Oliver Jarvis in the Mazda Motorsports DPI car 55. 4 LMP2s come next. Gabby Aubry in the 8 Tower Motorsport Orica. Paul-Luc Chatin for Era Motorsport, same type of chassis car 18. And again, another Orica for Devlin Di Francesco, and Dragon Speed number 82 is third, ahead of the RWR Eurasian number 51 car, which is being driven by Cody Ware. Don't really need to remind you of the order for GTLM, because they're completely together and it's likely to change at any moment, but I'll give it you anyway. Tommy Milner leads in the number 4 Corvette. Tonio Garcia glued to his rear tailpipes in the 3 Corvette. Then Conor Di Filippi just a few metres behind in the red BMW, and Davide Rigon is a massive 6 seconds adrift of that top 3, but looking to get involved as soon as possible. Augusto Farfus slightly more distant, he's over a minute adrift now in the 24 BMW, the black one. LMP3 is led by Oliver Askew for Riley Motorsports, the 74 Ligier, leading João Barbosa in another Ligier for Sean Creech Motorsport, number 33. And in GT Daytona, it's now Mauro Engel for Winward Racing in a Mercedes, number 57, leading the AF Corsa Ferrari of Simon Mann, 21. Kenny Habul, despite that grass track moment, is still in third in the 75 Sun Energy 1 Mercedes. And then it's a Lamborghini from Paul Miller Racing, fourth, car 1, and Jan Halen in the best of the Porsches for Wright Motorsports, car 16, despite that damage it incurred in the night when it arrived at turn 1 backwards, having had some contact. That is the latest Mazda in-race update, and there are now just under 8 hours to go. Back up onto Speedway turn 1 go a clutch of GT Daytona cars, led by Ben Keating, and I'm trying to judge the pace of Ben's number 97 Aston Martin to see whether it's carrying significant damage. It's about to be challenged by a couple of cars, and there is an overtake to be made there by the Wright Motorsport Porsche. Brilliant car placement from Jan Heylen to get on the inside of Corey Lewis and snatch 4th place away from the Paul Miller Racing Lamborghini. So Ben will be grateful not to have been involved in that. It was almost as similar as the clash that Ben had with the Porsche of Ted Giovannis. Thankfully, though, in this case, contact was avoided, Joe Bradley.
Yeah, this is what I mean, and it's like, really is like threading a needle into that bus stop chicane on the back straight. Very, very high speed. While we're in GTD land, I've got to mention Kenny Habel is now at the wheel of the 75, third in GTD. Kenny Habel in the number 75 Sun Energy Mercedes. Kenny is about to complete his mandatory bronze drive time. It's already done 5 stints previously. I think before towards the middle of the night he'd completed 5, and then he went off and had some rest. So this is the first time we're seeing Kenny back in the car. But that's one of the things that the teams will be ticking off, will be to ensure that they meet what the regulations they're obligated by the regulations, and they'll be making a note of their bronze drivers and making sure and ensuring that they have got the right amount of drive time and not underneath that. We've seen that on many occasions, haven't we, when teams have been excluded because of minor miscalculations with drive time, and we'd hate to see that because they're having a really strong run. They've been leading that class for some time, and now they're just kind of ebbing and flowing as we ebb and flow through the pit stop phases. Right now, 3rd place for 75.
Yeah, the regulations, if you're not paying attention, it's very easy to breach those when you're not intending to, because not only is there the set minimum drive time, particularly for people like bronze rated drivers and silvers as well to an extent, but also because it's a sliding scale which tells you that particular drivers can only be at the wheel of a car, for example, for 4 hours in any 6, but it can be any period of time that sort of slides along through the race, and it's very difficult from a strategist's point of view to stay on top of that, because it's a movable feast. You know, the race is happening around you, and if you're not paying full attention to cautions and when you think you might be able to get a driver out of the car thinking, right, they've done their time, sometimes the caution can really throw the cat amongst the pigeons, and time disappears at different rates depending on what part of the race you are in. So it's who would be a team strategist? Engineer's job is tough enough, but then to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed as far as drive times are concerned, it's a very tricky business indeed, and also the race officials need to stay on top of all of this as well. So I'll stick to the commentary. Thank you very much. Yeah, leave all the rest of the stuff to pick more important people than me and you.
That's what I was about to say, Johnny. That's where we're sat in the commentary booth. Car off, pointing in the wrong direction, just into the West Horseshoe there on the infield. Not sure. Try and clarify who that is. And it's the Wins liveried car, isn't it? Not sure the number off the top of my head, Johnny.
91, if it's an LMP3 car. Well, that looks like...
Yeah, it's LMP3.
Looks like a P2. No, it's a P2, I think. It's the 52 car, which has also got the Wins livery on it. And I just needed to see the race number there to see whether it had a blue backing or an orange backing, but it's too big a car to be a Ligier as it is in LMP3, so I reckon that's an LMP2 car with it's another Ben Keating machine that he drives from time to time. Remember, he's entered into 2 different cars this year, not a first for him, but the 52 car has at the moment Scott Huffaker, I make it.
Yeah. It's the PR1 Matheson Motorsport car, and it looks like he's kind of beached himself on that outside curve, the outer curve, into the pits. Has come some of our leaders. The Whelan car is in, the Mayer Shank Racing car 60 is in, Dave Cameron bringing that car in. Durrani's in the Whelan car, Castroneves in the number 10, and Kobayashi in the Allied Cadillac. Also, Renda van der Zande has not come in, he steered out, and that might be. I don't think that's anything to do with track position, is it? Just being caught out there. But the teams there, seeing that car beach, are kind of assuming that that will bring the full course caution, and they are getting into the pits before the stop window shuts. Wheel and car already on the move.
Preempting the caution, which, you know, can be clever until the caution doesn't happen. But it hasn't happened yet. But I think that's race control giving Scott Huffaker as much time as possible to recover the car. I couldn't work out whether it had made contact with the tyre or not. It's difficult to tell from that particular angle whether Scott can easily drive it out if it's resting place. There's a tyre wall there. What do you reckon, Joe? Is it just stalled, or has it suffered quite? Yeah, he's trying to get restarted, isn't he?
There's a chance that he could be beached, although there's no real heavy curbing on the exit. He just lost the back end going in, and he looks like the rear wheels are on the grass on the outside of that turn. Now we have gone full course caution now. It looks to me that he reversed the car. Now the car's moving ever so slightly. Now I'm wondering, Johnny, if that spin has been a selection issue, or whether he's spun it and he's just stalled the car. But the car's back on track and moving. It's going to be a very short. You know what? I bet the race stewards are thinking, why couldn't you have done that a minute ago?
Yeah.
We've drawn the yellow now.
Yeah. Well, it's not Scott's fault. It's not race control's fault either. It's just one of those quirks of a motor race. It so often happens that way. You know, you count to 10 or 20. Think he really cannot get out of there, so we must throw the caution. And 10 seconds later, the car's moving again. But I think the main issue was actually getting the car started once more, because the headlights were going on and off, which is indicative of a reset, Control-Alt-Delete, as it's often coined, and just getting the car going again. I was kind of siding with you that it was beached for a period of time. Now, whether he was able to roll it back sufficiently to make sure that the car was no longer grounding out, and then finally got enough power to the rear wheels to get him off the grass. But I'm just grateful to see the car not make anywhere near contact with the tyres. He stopped well short of the barrier, thankfully, and did well to half spin the car and keep it out of the scenery. It'll come down to pit road now. Sure. No, it doesn't. It continues on, because I suppose pits are closed right now, being a full course yellow. And then we will have our first phase of pit stops for the prototype cars. How long since the previous caution? Over an hour. So this will be a regular caution period with each batch of cars allowed to come into pit road and take on some much needed fuel. Quite possibly a driver change as well. Maybe a new set of tyres. And what this will provide, Joe, is again nose to tail DPIs for 5 cars that all remain on the lead lap, so we get to enjoy one of these fantastic restarts again.
And it's what's going to happen to Renger van der Zande, I think, Johnny. He steered out, whereas the cars behind him in 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th all pitted, and that has put the 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th place cars, of course, are going to come round right onto the tail of the leading 0-1, the Cadillac of Chip Ganassi Racing leads this race, but he kind of owes us a pit stop in comparison to the other runners around him. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out now.
Yeah, let's just see how
find
far
out how
through
far
the
into the stint he was. Yeah,
you can do that. Yeah,
I'm just checking that now, Jim.
To work out how much longer Renger is likely to go. Might be on the ragged edge in terms of fuel here, you know. The caution's definitely going to help the Dutchman, because you don't burn as much fuel circulating. Go on,
he's
Joe.
not on the edge of his fuel stint, Johnny. He's not on the edge of his fuel stint.
Does that suggest he's been in then? Because I've got him completing a 22 lap stint. So has he already come down pit road? you talking about Renger here, or are we talking about somebody else?
Yes. No, Van der Zande. I've got him at 22 laps as well, which means he's due a pit stop, isn't it? Very, very imminently.
Yeah.
He didn't sneak in under our noses, did he?
Well, I just wonder whether he's taken a stop as emergency service because it was that close. But no, he's still labelled as the race leader. Down to 19 seconds now because, of course, everything is being bunched up behind the safety car. But I think next time around, because we're circulating at, what, a third of the pace of racing speed, or probably even less than that, burning nothing like the amount of fuel it would do on a normal racing lap. So maybe they'll get away with this, a 23-lap stint. He did do 23 laps previously as well. And judging by how long the green's been out for, that will have been a fully green stint, I think.
It's been out for 38 minutes. Putting it in a time, putting it to a time sequence rather than laps. It's been out 38 minutes, so he very much is. And it looked like the cars behind got in just before we threw the yellow, preempting that yellow, as you mentioned, Johnny. And now we've got the 01 team, the Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac team, preparing to receive Renger van der Zande. So he didn't sneak in under our noses. Our data in front of us is correct, and he does indeed owe us a pit stop. So they're just waiting for the pits to open under this full course caution.
The team will know how close he is, because I think if there's any concern at all, they would have called him in for emergency fueling, which provides you with a quick shot of fuel for 5 seconds, but they haven't needed to do that, and that would have of course taken his lead position out, away from him as well, and wants to try and retain that for as much as possible. There's no telling how things will unfold once they finally do get to pit road. And the best place to be is out front. Okay.
He's gone past the pit entrance, so he's staying out. I'm not sure whether the pits have opened yet.
The last message from race control was to commence the pass around. That was 2 minutes ago. So, and car 5 has entered the pits. That's the only car that's peeled off so far. So Loic Duval is obviously right on the cusp, but confirmation that the pit lane is still not open. So Loic having to do emergency service here in the Mustang sampling Cadillac DPI. Renger van der Zande, or at least his team, Chip Ganassi Racing, are happy for that car to stay out. Happy in inverted commas. I'm sure they would have liked to have pitted the car, but they just cannot at the moment.
He's due a pit stop. He was getting to that point where in the fuel stint he was needing fuel, and it was just bad timing, Johnny. This is what can happen. It was bad timing that yellow came out, and he's obviously got enough fuel he can feel that he can run behind the safety car and make it round another lap. And the thing is, we need the pits to open under this caution process for the 01 to be received by the Ganassi team. They're waiting patiently, and they know what job in hand they've got. Looks like they're preparing a front section to go on the car. What you find the teams will do when they pit under a yellow period, they'll take the opportunity to remove the front deck and replace it with a serviced one or a brand new one. And while the serviced and brand new one is being used, they'll repair the winglets and clear out the ducting on the one that's just come off the car, and you'll see them swapping around. And it's usually a period because that's when they're not going to cost themselves too much time in the pit stop in the yellow. And that's what I think the Ganassi team have got in hand there as part of the servicing process on that 01 car.
Do they have in DPI such a thing as daytime bodywork, so that the the aero settings are very slightly different on that new nose of the car, because obviously, or rather the air quality changes, doesn't it, overnight? And I'm sure we've seen Toyota before at Le Mans changing bits of body panels because they feel that the car goes slightly better in different setups through the evening. And now, of course, we've reached the daylight portion of this race.
So he's entered the pits, and the number 48 has also come in to take a pit stop. The NASA team go to work. Fueling and tyres going on at the moment. Brenda van der Zande will stay in the car. There's no sign of a driver change there, I think. And get to that point of the stop where we are going to remove and replace the front section of the car. It's designed to be able to remove very quickly. There's maybe 3 or 4 fastenings, 4 fastenings on the car. The crew already with the right tools. That front end of the car is slipped off. The pristine looking, unblemished new front section is offered to the front of the car. They've got to get that in line, not forgetting to plug in the connector for the lights. Oh, beautifully designed, just the way that the front section, if you've ever, Johnny, tried to fit a piece of fiberglass to your race car, it doesn't always look as easy as that. Tear-off strip comes off the windscreen to give Van der Zande and a bit of oil replenishment also on full service then. And the field one off the apron and back out into the race.
Full service and then some, but if you did plan a nose change at some point, far better to do it under a caution period, ensure that you don't fall off the lead lap. But teams were doing full brake changes earlier on in the night time and didn't lose a lap. Jeremy Shaw making the comment that you couldn't do that in the old days 30, 40, 50 years ago, but the technology these days allows you to do that fairly comfortably within a safety car lap. And I believe that is the first fluid replacement for a Cadillac, of which there are 4 in the race. So possibly just covering all bases there. There were, I think, 4 in the race, but 3 in contention at the moment, with the Chip Ganassi, the Whelen Engineering and the Ally Cadillac car. The other one that sadly is no longer in the fight is the 5 car that hit problems much earlier on, and car 5, though still in the race, is down in 35th position overall with Loic Duval at the wheel. That was the car that came in for some emergency service before the pit lane was opened properly. Renger van der Zande then on and out lap. I'm sure someone that is attuned to his car as much as the Dutchman will notice a slight difference then in the car's performance because of the new nose. The main reason we're doing that is because the other one was laced in tyre pickup, and the problem is the rubber wraps itself around the dive planes and the carefully designed aero of that car, and all of a sudden the aero stops working. It also becomes slightly heavier as well because it's got lumps of rubber all over the front. So the team can now clean that now that it's safely off the car and the new piece has been attached. And Joe Bradley, with the VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock update, knows a little bit more, in fact, about the work that was taking place.
Well, I haven't. I've been informed by one of the collective listening, Nick, no second name, NH247, has mentioned that he understands more about generating tyre. I'm not sure. I'll check that out. Still can't find out the second name. Bodywork changes about generating tyre temp at lower ambience than anything to do with air. Lower air density is more about extra horses at night, of course. So we may have seen that, Johnny. We may have seen the nighttime front of that car being removed and the daytime one being put on that car. So you called it there, my friend. Right about that.
Yeah, the word I was chasing for was atmospherics rather than aesthetics, but I think I was wrong with both of those in actual fact. And
you would have been right. I think you would have been right on both counts. I think you would have been right on both counts. Aesthetics because it's cleaner and it looks
it looks better,
tidier. And atmospherics, because it moves the air a little bit differently in the daytime.
Okay. Palmer gets two things right in one fell swoop. Mark this day down in your diary, that doesn't happen very often, let me assure you. So yeah, it looks very smart indeed, does the 0-1 car.
So pretty much the whole field, Johnny, taking advantage of this full course caution and pitting, as the GTLM guys have pitted now and are back out. Would you believe all 5 cars that are running at the front of the GTLM field have been in and full service?
Yeah, a number of people spotting that the rest of the GT Daytona field takes the opportunity to pit. Thank you to Declan Brennan for once again his extra pair of eyes on the Daytona class. It's tough to call this race because there is so much happening all at once, and almost being able to see the whole of the racetrack is a negative thing, because you think, oh, I should have seen that, I should have spotted that collision over there, I should have seen that overtake here, because it all plays out in front of you. But at the same time, you cannot have your eyes in all of the places around this amazing racetrack. There are lots of nooks and crannies that tend to hide little incidents, particularly when you sit in the main grandstand. There can be the odd overtake pulled off at corner 2A, which is a tricky corner to actually see from that distance. You need to be down on the infield to witness the right and left kink between turn 2 and 3 on the run into the International Horseshoe. And cars can go missing very easily around here, even if you're a team wondering, where's our car gone? It should have finished the last lap 2 seconds ago. There are 1 or 2 that have felt that already this weekend. Sadly, some retirements, including in the LMP2 category that started with 10 cars. It is now down to, well, possibly 6. The best 7 cars. I don't know how Antonio Fuoco is going in the Cetilar Racing, the Lara. That car had actually led the class for a period of time, number 47. But Fuoco, I think, has been in the pits for a little while now. The 3 definite retirements for LMP2 are the Racing Team Nederland Orica, last driven by Guido van der Garde, High Class Racing's Orica, number 20 car, and Ben Hanley's Dragon Speed machine, sadly reaching the end of their race after just 53 laps completed. Another car that is definitely out of the race is the Franck Pereira GRT Grasser Racing Lamborghini Huracan. Doesn't look too rosy for the sister car within that team either. The treble 1 of Mirko Bortolotti, Rolfin Eichen, Marco Mappelli and Stein Scotthorst. There are 1 or 2 other question marks as well in the GT Daytona category. Although still running for Vasser Sullivan, a now repaired number 12 Lexus, which caught fire in the night time on the back straight, arriving at the bus stop chicane and then grinding to a halt with a large amount of flame licking from both exhaust outlets, which exit the car just behind the front wheels, and that started a small grass fire as well, with Frankie Montecalvo at the wheel having to exit very quickly indeed. But the corner workers, the marshals with their rescue unit, were to the scene very quickly indeed, as you would expect here at the Daytona 24 Hours. Quick response, doesn't even begin to describe it if you are in trouble around this place. GTLM cars snaking their way through the bus stop chicane, followed by the GT Daytona cars. Really not very far away now, Joe Bradley, from the order being re-established, and I think we're shaping ourselves up for a restart very soon.
Yeah, they're bunching together, aren't they, Johnny? I think it might be this time by.
I think you're right.
I think we're right. I think we're about to go green, JP.
So Elliot Castroneves deciding he's got enough of a margin just to weave very slightly to the left and to the right. The Mazda, remember, is not on the lead lap for Harry Tinknell, and round the outside there goes the all-white car of Renger van der Zande, wasting absolutely no time at all. Picked off at least 1 place there and unlapped, or rather lapped again himself compared to the Mazda. So that put Renger up to 3rd position already. He's managed to leap ahead Pipo Derani as well. Confirm that in just a moment as they head into the West Horseshoe. But there's been no change at the head of the order for Elio Castroneves. Then it is Dane Cameron in the 60 Meyer-Shank Racing Acura. So 2 of the Acuras, first and second. And then in third position, Renger van der Zande, hotly pursued by the Pipo Derani car. Jimmy Johnson losing 1 place in the Ally Cadillac machine. Started, restart 4th, is now in 5th position and dueling with Harry Tinkle, who's still a couple of laps down. Gabriel Aubry taking the restart in the lead of LMP2 from Kyle Tilley and Devlin Di Francesco. And it's Tommy Milner, Davide Rigon, Antonio Garcia and Conor Di Filippi for Corvette, Ferrari, another Corvette and BMW. And you can lump the other BMW into that as well. They are completely together once more. And that's what ensures that GTLM, I think, will stay nose to tail all the way to the finish, pretty much. If we get cautions as regularly as we've been having them, and because of that, we're not going to reach a record distance, by the way. In fact, at the moment, we're going to struggle to make 800 laps. The record distance set last year at 8:33. But these cautions, yes, they interrupt the flow, but they do deliver a restart like that every couple of hours or so. So they're welcome for me, but I do appreciate from the team engineer's point of view, you want to be into as much green flag running as possible.
And they're a bit scary as well when you're watching your car.
Well, that's true.
TV screens on the pit wall going side by side, almost wheel banging. I'm a little bit perturbed by the exhaust note on that third of the Whelen engineering car. Durrani, we were aware that the team had concerns about the underfloor, which was causing something. I think we're pretty settled with that, but the exhaust note for me sounds like it may have a leaking exhaust, quite frankly, from the header maybe, the exhaust manifold. If you're in Europe, it's got a completely different sound to it, and I'm not sure, usually when that happens, lack of back pressure can cause an increase in power, but it's also doing detrimental effect to the overall workings of the car and the engine, and it can cause all sorts of anomalies within the engine management system. So I'll be amazed if that car makes it in 7.5 hours with that exhaust sounding like that. Hey, I've been through one many times.
Have you mentioned what we think is the issue for the Cetilar Racing Dallara, by the way? Obviously you have.
Well, I thought you mentioned that.
No, I didn't call it because I thought I'd leave that to you.
All right. Well, I've had information from the Cetilar team that they had high temperatures in the number 47 Dallara, high temperatures in the engine and the gearbox. It turns out that the gearbox is what's fallen over on that car, and that's caused, I think that's down as an official retirement now, Johnny, am I right?
Yes, you are
right. Gearbox. It's a gearbox failure, and going way back to the very beginning of this race, a gearbox issue destroyed the hopes of the racing team Netherlands, the number 22. Fritz van Aert put the car off, and it's believed by the team that when Fritz put it into reverse to back it out of the tyres, very front of the car, they broke a tooth off one of the cogs in the gearbox. That tooth, because it's very tight confines of the inside of these gearboxes, that broken tooth caused absolute mayhem inside the gearbox of the 29 and caused a catastrophic failure. And that's all it takes. All it takes is a chipped tooth. We've got a loose bit of metal floating around there, and if that gets in between the teeth on the cogs, you have catastrophic gearbox issues. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's something similar when they get that number 47 Dallara gearbox off that Cetilar racing car and to the workshop, open it up, and they'll find something nasty in there.
To completely go against my last statement, I looked at the screen and 47 is back in the run.
Yes.
Literally. It's been in the pits for 3 hours. That has not been a quick fix for the gearbox. replacing the whole unit. But yeah, high engine temperature, high gearbox temps were a major concern for Chetelaar, and that's the reason why it sadly had to sit out a very large portion of this race. But they are not a retirement. Let me retract that statement. Dallara lives again to fight a few more hours at least.
I like that spirit, Johnny.
So some
I
report.
like that spirit.
Yeah, well, those guys at Chetelaar, run by AF Corsa, have won many an award just purely for racing spirit before, either awarded by us here at Radio Show Limited, or I think one year the ACO actually gave them a gentleman award after a season at the European Le Mans Series. One thing they are not short of down at that team is sheer and brazen enthusiasm. So if they can get the car out again, they will do so. And Andrea Bellicchi, he's 41st of something like 43 remaining cars, but that doesn't matter because now the target is to finish the race.
And why wouldn't you? If you're one of those 4 drivers, all 4 of those drivers want to drive here at the Daytona International Speedway. So if they can get the car out and running, we can at least enjoy and have the pleasure of driving a racing car around this beautiful track. And I think that's what it's all about. There comes a point, if you've encountered issues, where you've just got to resign yourself to, well, today's not our day, let's just go and enjoy driving this race car. And I've just been told, Becky Nelson Balker just asked me this information, it's their final race with this Dallara. That's a good enough reason to get that car back out and enjoy the Dallara LMP2 for the final time.
Yeah, I wonder, and somebody will have the stats about that car, how many races it's actually competed in, because there'll be a few 24-hour races, I'm sure, along the way. Not here at Daytona, but 24 hours in Le Mans. And then it will have done an awful lot of 4 and 6, and quite possibly 8-hour races as well along the way. So someone will have the history of that car. Remember, 4 different available chassis in LMP2, and we're about to go into a slightly different era for that division as well, with some tamed LMP2 cars, because the top class in the World Endurance Championship is becoming hypercar, which won't produce quite the lap time that LMP1s did, and therefore the trickle-down effect to other classes is that they will have to be slightly slowed as well. So it's the end of an era, really, for LMP2s to an extent. A little bit of performance shaved off, and of course the same 4 manufacturers that feature in LMP2 currently will be the same manufacturers available in LMDH as well. The future category, which will take this particular championship forward, and those cars, the LMDH cars, will be eligible to be run at the 24 Hours of Le Mans as well, in a very interesting decision for future sports car racing. And hopefully there'll be the opportunity for a lot more crossover between the ACO governed and regulated championship and all things stateside. 7 hours and 24 minutes still to go. Unsurprisingly, the top 2 in GTLM are completely neck and neck, with a BMW just in the background, a second and a half away. Connor De Filippi keeping the 2 C8Rs very much in sight, and Augusto Farfus, who has won this race, I think I'd said, the last 2 years running. Yes, he has. Now, is Augusto the only driver to have featured in the 2 BMW wins here at Daytona in 2019 and 2020? I believe that's the only common name. So 2019 was Farfus, joined by Connor De Filippi, Philip Eng and Colton Herter. And in 2020, that was a shortened race, remember, 2019. And then in 2020, which ran to a record distance, a total of 786 laps for the GTLM category, it was that man again, Augusto Farfus, but this time with John Edwards, Chaz Mostert and Jesse Krohn. So 25 BMW won it in 2019, the 24 BMW in 2020. And could they do it again 3 years in a row, therefore, in 2021? There are 2 Corvettes out front in order to stop that from the Vet brand, and 2 BMWs still with fire in their belly. I think in previous years we've had one of the BMWs drop away and the other one looking very strong. Yeah, in 2019, the sister car, the 24 that didn't take the win, finished something like 20-odd laps adrift in 9th position. And it wasn't particularly a happy year last year for the sister BMW either. 24 BMW won it from 2 Porsches, and a 4th place finish was the best that Corvette could muster from their debut event. But remember, 2020 would be very special indeed for Corvette racing, with a championship to take away with them at the end of the season. And back from a brand new car, so they did incredibly well with the mid-engine Corvette straight out of the box. Busy down at turn 1 again with GT Daytona cars, including the Kenny Habul machine. Now, Kenny stayed out, didn't he, Joe, in the last caution, and that is again in order for him to tick off his driving time. So they're getting the bronze time burned here as quickly as possible, and that will mean that he can hand over to his 3 co-drivers to the flag, they being Raffaele Marciello, Luca Stoltz and Michael Grenier.
So he's just lost a place there, Johnny. That was an overtake for position. Jan Halen in the Light Motorsports Porsche, car 16, moving up to second in the GTD class. And Kenny Habul just ticking off that driver time to achieve his obligation, but no disrespect to Kenny, we wouldn't expect him to be as quick out on track as a driver like Jan Halen.
No, but yeah, go on.
Just clearing my throat there. News in from Laurent Vantour via Josh Barrett. Thanks, Josh. He's in the number 9. He's down to drive the number 9, taking over from Matt Campbell. That car currently 6th in GTD. It's the Fat Motorsports Porsche, due in for Laurent Vantour to take over. And Laurent informs us that during the night there was a pit road accident in the night, and our steering is bent pretty badly. I'll guess we'll try to hang in there. So it's a kind of a damage limitation run now for that number 9. And I can only guess, when he says a pit road accident, which was culminated in bent steering, I can only kind of suspect, Johnny, that that car hit the pit wall. It's the only thing I can think that bent the steering.
That's a fair summation, I would say. There's a little bit of speculation in there, but as you say, you've got to hit something very, very solid in order to bend the steering, because it's built incredibly strongly and built to take a lot of punishment as well. But once it starts to be bent in the angles it wasn't designed for by a concrete wall, there tends to be only one winner there. Kenny Habul, every credit to him for holding off briefly a certain Mauro Engel there in exactly the same car, the Winboard Racing Mercedes, level pegging Kenny on the infield section there, and Kenny Habul was giving no quarter or no inch given or taken there for the 75 car, and they were elbowing each other out. I think Kenny realised he was probably going to get picked off at some point by Mauro Engel, but he didn't make the job easy for the German, and the 57 car does slot through, and as you described, Joe, Jan Halen followed suit with the Right Motorsports car. Daniel Serra's up to 3rd, 21 AM Corsa Ferrari, and in 4th place now Corey Lewis in his Lamborghini Huracan. And Kenny Habul, presumably that is the minimum drive time done and dusted now, because he has handed over to his Canadian teammate Michael Grenier, and Kenny Habul can take a well-earned rest. He'll find a seat either on the Pratt perch or back in the RV and enjoy the remaining 7 hours and 18 minutes. He can become a fan for once, but it's very tricky to do that when one of the cars that you're watching is yours and you are absolutely desperate for a race win. But well in contention, that 75 car. Kenny Habul can breathe a sigh of relief that his hard work for this 24-hour race is done, Joe.
Yeah, and a great run for Kenny. He had a very busy day yesterday at the start of this race. He did a 30-lap stint, followed by a 14. He then handed the car over. He then did a 27-lap stint, an 11-lap stint that was punctuated by, I think, a yellow flag where he came in then for fuel, and then he finished off yesterday's job with a 31-lap stint, and then back in the car today to fulfil his requirement. He'll be happy with that. I'm not sure he'll probably be beating himself up, and I am trying to see if we can actually get Kenny on the telephone and maybe give him a call and get his thoughts on it. I'm sure he's not beating himself up too much for letting Jan Halen get by there, because you know he's up against the pros there, and he is the AM driver, and it was great, and he's kept it on the island, and he's looked absolute for the AM.
Yeah, and remaining in 6th place for Michael Grenier. So it's all about making sure you hang on to that lead lap for as long as possible. And they're still there. Okay, there's 1 minute and 20 seconds now between the rejoining 75 and the next car, which will be Matt Campbell's Pfaff Motorsports Porsche. Maybe that the Sun Energy One car drops another place, but maybe Aidan Reid is at a sufficient distance away, actually, in the Turner Motorsport BMW. You always get this slightly grey area when a car rejoins and the timing screen, the timing system sorts everything out. But they are there or thereabouts, crucially, for Sun Energy One. Meanwhile, Renger van der Zande in the 01 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac is leading the way by 1.5 seconds from Elia Castroneves in the number 10 car in the Acura. Then it's the Meyer-Schacht Racing Acura third, with Pipo Derani and Jimmy Johnson for Whelen and for Ally Cadillac Racing. Tower Motorsports, Gabriel Aubry leading in the number 8 car for LMP2, ahead of Kyle Tilley in the Era Motorsport Orica, and Devlin Di Francesco still in 3rd position as the Elia Castroneves Acura arrives at the bus stop with 75 Mercedes just ahead of Michael Grenier. And around the outside now of the rejoined 47 Dallara will go Pipo Derani to put another lap on that LMP2 car. Pipo's last lap still very much on the money, a 1:36.832, and he is only 0.6 of a second shy of Dane Cameron. At no point really do we know what age of tyres these cars are on. I know Jeremy Shaw got some information earlier on in the piece about some tyres that were being double stinted. There's nothing really stand out in terms of times being produced by the DPIs there which suggest that anybody's on very old Michelin rubber. I think that they're able to hold some of the better tyres back. It's 38 sets available to all DPI cars, but that's not for the whole of the race, that's for every single session. So it didn't involve qualifying last weekend, of course, in this year's format of the race, but they've had to do 4 free practice sessions and now all of the race on just 38 tyres, 38 sets of tyres.
It's like a holding pattern, Johnny, at this stage. Just over 7 hours remaining. They're lapping in the 36s, the 37s. Van der Zande currently holds the fastest lap of the race so far with a 1:34.6, and the cars behind him 1:35.2 for the Castroneves car, 1:35.2 for the Dane Cameron Meyer-Schacht car. That's their fastest laps, and then the Whelen Engineering car, that's got a fastest lap of a 34.8. So we're not at an optimum pace, we're at a very quick pace, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like what we described in the GTLM class, where you've got those cars just keeping to the pace, keeping to the program, pushing without risk. Yes, they are pushing the cars without really destroying and leaning on those tyres in an overly aggressive way, and that's pretty much what we're going to see right now until perhaps the final couple of pit stops, and then it'll be gloves off, and we'll see what performance levels of these cars are driving. It's really like going towards the checkered flag.
Nothing again between Pipo Derani and one of the LMP2 cars who's looking to get by. But this is tough when you're in a DPI car and looking for a way past the LMP2. So your DPI is faster up on the high banks and the back straightaway, but it's a game of patience when you're on the infield, because the aero benefit for an LMP2 versus a DPI is about the same. Actually, it's pursuing an Acura, I beg your pardon. So you can't tell the difference between the back of an LMP2 and the DPI, but from the front that is very Acura shaped indeed, the Dane Cameron car. The point still stands, though, that it's tough to overtake when you're in the top 2 prototype classes, and the DPI looking to lap an LMP2 car. Much better to do it through speedway turns 1 and 2, sort of shape up a manoeuvre that can then be completed on the back straight and into the braking area for the bus stop. So Pipo very close indeed to Dane Cameron coming out of turn 6, and then Dane kind of checked out for the rest of the lap. So whether the back markers meant that Pipo just couldn't get onto the throttle as early as he would have liked, he is steadily reeling in Dane Cameron now as they reach the tri-oval. Just going to run out of straight road though. That 31 car looks very good on brakes, mind you. They have changed the brakes on that car. Probably the case on all of the DPIs actually, as around the outside there goes the 0-1 of Renger van der Zande, and that was a moment or two ago to take the race lead, and Helio Castroneves had very little response to be able to provide to the bravery from Renger van der Zande, who was up on the high side through 1 and 2 in the marbles. And from Helio Castroneves' viewpoint, Joe Bradley, that 0-1 car was moving around all over the place in the marbles, fantastically controlled by Mr. van der Zande.
Worth the risk, wasn't it, just to get by that traffic? And I think that's where the time we're going to see being made up, and it's going to be those decisive moves. And the move really has to be decisive, Johnny. You need to tell the slower class car that you are meaning business, that you're coming through. It's the tentative approach that will cause the GT driver to be a little bit hesitant, and that ends up in all sorts of constant cars tripping over themselves. That was a decisive move, and quite courageous as well from Renger. He's quite known aptly for his bravery, isn't he, the Dutchman? And that was another example of just sending it really, and having to deal with the car on the marbles. And we really saw the skill and the reaction time of these young drivers. They are absolutely outstanding. I've said it before, I'll say it again, John. This is the top echelon of sports car drivers that we're seeing here at Daytona.
Agreed, and I'm not saying I necessarily forget that the intervening 12 months between each of these events, but it doesn't take me very long to access the archives and remember this race is just a wonderful event to kickstart the season. Of course, actually here on the Radio Show Limited network of channels, the first event of our season was the Dubai 24 Hours a couple of weekends ago. Then we had the Raw, unusually between Dubai and this event, and the Raw between the 24 included the positions on the grid being aligned courtesy of a race, and there is still that slightly grey area as to whether the 50-odd lap race last weekend, won by the 31 crew, was actually a race at all, and will that stand as a race win in the IMSA archives, or was it merely a qualifying session held over, was it 51 laps or something? So Jeremy's still unsure about that. We'll try and get some concrete information in due course. This is round 1 though of the championship, make no mistake about that, and will offer the winners at 350 points, so that's a factor of 10 multiplication year on year. Used to be 35 points, and irrespective of how long the race was, that's another really interesting quirk to this championship, is that irrespective of whether you've won a 2-hour and 40-minute race or a 24-hour race, it's exactly the same points haul. Of course, in the WEC they do things slightly differently there and have increased points for a 24-hour race as opposed to a 6-hour race, but I kind of quite like the fact that it's the same points on offer. There are various stages to this race as well, where points are awarded according to the positions at the 6-hour mark, etc. But last weekend's qualifying race did run to 51 minutes, just over an hour and 40, and was a win for Felipe Nasr and Pipo Derani. They drove as a twosome for Whelen Engineering Racing in the Cadillac. Second, and therefore second on the grid for the race, was Oliver Jarvis and Harry Tingle in the Mazda, and Tristan Vautier and Loic Duval in the 5 JDC Miller Motorsports Cadillac, the Mustang sampling car, which unfortunately has dropped well down now in this event, but they managed to achieve 3rd place on the grid. So, Joe Bradley and Johnny Palmer are here in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. You're tuned to RS2 IMSA Radio, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels. We are 7 or 8 minutes away from another hour being completed. That will put 17 hours in the books for this year's race, and it is time for a VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock report. A chance to speak to a guy that we were waxing lyrical about just a few moments ago. We've given you, Kenny Haball, a moment at least to catch your breath, but well, a frenetic stint, and one that will live long in my memory, because you're very nearly towards the end held off a certain Mauro Engel, also in a Mercedes. Brilliant driving, Kenny.
Oh, thanks, mate. I appreciate it. I was driving my nuts off, I'll tell you that much. There was a lot of bloody pressure looking in the mirror, and bogeys all over me, and my right rear was shot. It was starting to go off, and he was a little bit wounded, so I was struggling to get traction out of the low corners. And of course, when you got Mauro Engel looking at you might as well be in the ocean and a great white's looking at you.
Well, let's say that... go on, Joe, you ask him the question.
I was just going to say, Kenny, you yesterday, I'll call it yesterday, it was before the night time, you did quite a few back-to-back stints. Give us an idea of how physical it is. I mean, all right, your job is done now, isn't it? That was I believe that was your last stint. You've qualified with your drive time. It was really busy for you before the nighttime sessions, wasn't it?
Oh, mate, it was. And I tell you what, I'm not too happy with them, because for some reason, when I was due to come in for a stop and do a double, obviously get fuel, and of course you're supposed to get tyres. And they said, look, we're sorry, we're going to keep you on the old tyres and give you 120 litres of fuel. I said, you got to be joking, mate. I'm as nervous as a butcher's son. You know, that's just impossible with all that weight, and the rears are just melted. So that was tough for me, and they did it twice. So I don't know what that was about, you know, but I said, these professionals are meant to be doing that stuff, not me.
Yeah, leave that to the pro driver, eh? So what exactly do you mean then? So the heavy car on the worn-out tyres?
Yeah, so they wanted to save some new sets for the end because we were short, and so I did a double stint. And when I come in, I was expecting tyres, and they said, can you last another stint on the old tyres? And I said, I can, but I mean, it's just really tricky with all that fuel in the back. So, mate, look, all in all, thanks to Mercedes-AMG, I'm really proud. It's a strong car, and mate, I'm 47 years old, so it's not that easy anymore, but my lap times were very good, very consistent, and we're happy.
We commented on the consistency of your lapping, and we've been really singing your praises, Kenny. That was a great stint. Now, with 7 hours of this race remaining, you can kind of dust off the overalls, hang them up. Your job is done, and I've got to say, you should be proud of yourself, because you've done an excellent job, i.e. you've got the car back in one piece, because it's very, very dicey out there. Have you, at this stage of the race, is it a little bit of relief, or does the disappointment of not getting back in the car that you're at this race now overshadow that?
No, I'm relieved, mate. I'm going to have a coffee and a donut and just watch these guys. I don't want to get back in it.
Kenny, well done. You've done your job, mate, and it should be a big pat on the back. Yeah, usually at this stage I'll be patting you on the back and getting a handful of sweat. I'll let you go and cool off, and thanks for talking to us, Kenny. Enjoy the rest of the race.
Appreciate it. Appreciate everything. Thank you, guys.
Kenny Haball, who I'm most envious of, because normally in any usual motorsport year, right after Daytona, the RSL, the Radio Show Limited team, will be heading for Mount Panorama to call the Bathurst 12 Hours. Sadly, that race is missing a year for 2021 for obvious reasons. But Kenny, I understand, has just bought a house on Mount Panorama, so he'll be heading back to that wonderful part of New South Wales, and we'll get views across just an epic track, sadly with not any race cars on it next weekend, although he'll probably have a sneaky lap or two once the security are looking the other way.
Just a case of
3.5
gate, isn't it, driving on?
Well, for him it sounds like it is. You just head to the end of his driveway and make sure you remember which way the traffic goes.
Yeah, hopefully we get back to Oz.
Well, that's still the difficulty, isn't it? Whether his home country will let him in. at the moment. He'll certainly need to spend a couple of weeks in a hotel before he can do that. Anyway, let's move on, because we've got a really close fight in GT Daytona between Mercedes and Ferrari. That looks like for the lead of the class. It very definitely is. Daniel Serra around the outside, but the 57 car's not having one bit of it. And Maro Engel stays to the inside line. OK, 2 wheels on the grass for the German. But he could see that lead being snatched away from him, and Maro Engel was not going to give up the fight. I could see those cars almost starting to touch one another. They avoided the contact, thankfully, and the 57 Mercedes to the inside line retains the race lead. But, you know, this lap, actually, the leader was called as Daniel Serra for the space of a corner. And now it's gone back again to the 57 Mercedes. Fabulous racing, still over 7 hours to go. And the 0-1 is back on pit road because we've had sufficient time under green since the last stint, 31 minutes. Well, remember that pretty much everybody pitted in the last caution, which was just under 20 minutes in duration. And we must have had, therefore, roughly 20-odd laps under green, which means that the DPIs need to have another splash of fuel. It was 21 laps for Renger van der Zande, 25 for Elio Castroneves. Well, he was helped out by the caution. Jimmy Johnson has done 21 laps as well, and all 3 just pitted. But that brilliant run that Daniel Serra had on Maro Engel out of Speedway turn 4, a little bit of side draft as well, taking to the outside line and then wanting to put the Ferrari in front of the Mercedes. But Maro Engel's been in that position many times before. He wasn't going to permit the Brazilian in the very Italian car from doing that. But the very lap later, Serra's going to have another slice of the action here. We're in exactly the same mould. You can be forgiven for thinking this might be an action replay. It is not, and it is the next lap around as Daniel Serra tries exactly the same move. This was not quite as close, and they're about to be overtaken by a Ligier in the LMP2 category as well. Well, make sure, if you're not already, that you've clicked onto imsaradio.com and to the live video tab to make sure you can stay on top of this. We owe you, I'm almost sad to say, a Mazda Racing update with the latest order. But hopefully in the background, if you've got the video stream at your disposal, you can enjoy this scrap at the head of GT Daytona. It's RS2 IMSA Radio for 2021, and time for a Mazda in-race update. Kevin Magnussen for the Cadillac Chip Ganassi Racing Squad has completed 566 laps, scored as the leader, but that car is actually on an outlap after pit stop number 29. And as I utter those words, Elio Castroneves will become the new race leader. So car 10 now out front from Kevin Magnussen. By the way, Elio Castroneves drives the Acura from Konica Minolta, ARX 05. And the 60 car, Dane Cameron from Meyer Shank Racing, that Acura is in 3rd position. Pipo Derani running in 4th, and number 31 Whelen Engineering caddy ahead of Jimmy Johnson's similar machine for Allied Cadillac Racing. And then the Harry Tincknell Mazda still 2 laps off the pace in car 55, but lap times being produced from the Mazda DPI are still very solid indeed. The 18 Kyle Tilley driven Era Motorsport Orica leads LMP2 from Mathieu Vaxivière back inside the Tower Motorsport car. Devlin Di Francesco has just come into the pit lane to serve a scheduled pit stop number 30 for car number 82. GTLM is Tommy Milner leading his teammate Antonio Garcia, both in Corvettes, car 4 ahead of number 3. In 3rd position, it's Augusto Farfus for BMW Team RLL squad, the first of the M8, and Davide Rigon is 4th for Risi Competizione. Connor Di Filippi 5th in the second of the BMWs, the red and white one. In LMP3, Oliver Askew in the Riley Motorsports Ligier leads the category, 17th position overall for car 74. Second in LMP3 is Joao Barbosa for Sean Creech Motorsport, and 3rd is Stephen McAleer for Bulner Motorsports. And in GT Daytona, you don't need a timing screen to tell the difference between the top 2 in the GT3 category, because Maro Engel and Daniel Serra are pretty much door handle all the way around the lap. It's still just about the Mercedes ahead of the Ferrari, 1st and 2nd. Jan Heylen is 3rd for the Wright Motorsports Porsche. And fourth position, Corey Lewis in the best of the Landos for Paul Miller Racing. Fifth is another Porsche for Matt Campbell and the plaid liveried Pfaff Motorsports car number 9. There are 7 hours still to go in the 59th edition of the Rolex 24 of Daytona here on RS2 IMSA Radio. That is the latest Mazda in-race update. Fabulous entertainment being delivered by Maro Engel and Daniel Serra, and they've got to be careful, along with strapping very closely indeed, not to be delaying themselves too much, so that Jan Heylen can then be a part of this battle. He's about 7 seconds away, so incredibly, despite the closeness of the battle at GT Daytona, they're not losing a great deal of time, able to punch out 1 minute 46.7 for Engel at 1:46.8 for Serra. And
what positions again?
last time around, they have, I know, that's what's momentarily confusing me. Now, what I don't know is whether the Ferrari properly established itself as the lead, or there was some contact that time through, and that was a slight touch from Maro Engel to ensure the Ferrari did not take the position, and that's really put Daniel Serra on the back foot. But that's the type of contact, Joe Bradley, joining me in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, that will be reviewed, I'm sure, by race control.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like they'll run out of real estate, didn't it? It's the, you know what? I'm going to say this. I'm going to pull this out. It's probably the hardest piece of racetrack in the world, turn 1 here in Daytona. You're coming off the banking, you're turning and braking at the same time for maximum speed. It's the run all the way from the bus stop chicane on the back straight, all the way around NASCAR's Speedway turns 3, turn 4, and down towards the tri-oval, and then as you're coming off the tri-oval, you are trying to control the car and modulate the brake and scrub off the speed so you can actually turn in. Let's add into that mix that you've got a car alongside doing exactly the same, and that was just a prime example where both cars are just absolutely trying to make that corner and just basically ran out of racing room for one another. They've had a mild contact. Hopefully, Johnny, that contact won't have too much of a detrimental effect, and we continue to see this. My concern, if I was on the wall for any of these, either the Mercedes or the Ferrari, would be just how much the drivers are taking out of those tyres by maintaining this pace and actually racing one another.
Yeah, and well, I don't think Maro Engel is necessarily the character type to say, in this phase of the race, Daniel Serra is slightly quicker than me, I'm going to let him go, because the all-important thing is that you hang on to the lead. Lead lap, yes, most important, but class lead where possible, hang on to it. And what he has provided with, I'm sure, unintentional contact in turn 1 is just a little bit of breathing space now, to the tune of 0.6 of a second, and Daniel Serra, having worked incredibly hard, A, to reel the Mercedes in, and then B, to get possibly 3 bites of the cherry there coming out of Speedway turn 4. He'd done it on sequential laps, put the Ferrari in a cracking position, and clearly that top-end poke in that Ferrari is mighty compared to the Mercedes. You've got the draft as well that you should factor into it, but it's the ability to gobble up the mileage coming out of the bus stop chicane and through Speedway turns 3 and 4. And the Ferrari just seems to be slightly sweeter towards the end of each of those laps, and he was able to get fully alongside and fully in front, albeit for a short period of time, of the Mercedes. But then it was a question of whether he could get the Ferrari down to the inside line to take the apex at turn 2, and Engel on his inside was never going to make that easy. So 5/10 of a second is currently the margin, Engel to Serra. Then this 7-second gap back to Jan Heylen, who has in turn a 5-second cushion on Corey Lewis to the Paul Miller Racing Lamborghini Huracan. Matt Campbell in the Pfaff Motorsport Porsche is 5th, and still going strongly in 6th place is the Gradient Racing Run Sun Energy One Mercedes of formerly Kenny Habul, the man that we had on here on RS2 IMSA Radio a short time ago, now being driven by his co-driver Michael Grenier, with a certain Lucas Stoltz and Raffaele Marciello still to come in the 75. They'll be working out when to apply those drivers in the remaining hours. pretty close between Kevin Magnussen and Dane Cameron as all mechanics prepare themselves down in pit road. So the 10 car not very far away from a pit stop. Very impressive indeed. Some press-ups going on as a part of the warm-up down at Wayne Taylor Racing and the Konica Minolta outfit. So Helio Castroneves pitted, that car has pitted in total 27 times. And he's got 27 laps on the stint. This has been a long run, Joe Bradley. There was the tail end of the... Oh no, beg pardon. I needed to scroll across a little bit further to tell me that Helio's now into his next stint of 5 laps. So maybe that was just a bit of down training from Konica Minolta and their crew, because they've already performed that 27th pit stop, and it'll be another half an hour or so before the car is back in again. But Castroneves, on the face of it, 26 laps looks a very long one, but as I say, that included the tail end of the previous caution as well, Joe. We're up to just over 40 minutes of this current green flag run.
I think I'm back, Johnny.
Aha! Here is Joe Bradley. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I was just saying, Johnny, that we talk a lot to the drivers and we talk a lot about the drivers and the physicality and the exertion that the drivers go through. But endurance racing is also very, very physical and exertive on crew members. I mean, try being a crew member. The idea of being crewing a race car is you want long periods while the car is out on track and going round and round doing what it's supposed to do, and then you get bursts of intensity. The car comes in the pit, then you've got to get the job right, you've got to get the wheels going on, you've got to get the tyre onto the pegs, you've got to get the hood back on, or reacting to adversity like we've seen all night, and the car coming in with a problem and having to be repaired. It's a pure team sport, endurance racing, and isn't that why we love it? Isn't that why we fall in love with endurance sports car racing? It's a massive feat. When you get towards the checkered flag, it's an achievement just to get your car to the finish. And I coined the phrase, didn't I? A soap opera behind every garage door. Well, I suppose in IMSA racing, it's a soap opera behind every concrete piece of pit wall.
Yeah. And you can understand the annual outpouring of emotion from the whole team if you are lucky enough to be part of a squad that takes victory, no matter what class you're in. But there's also, to an extent, an outpouring of emotion if you can just get to the finish. And you might be in the middle 30s in terms of overall position. But, you know, if the target at the end of the day was to get to the finish and you managed to achieve that, that is something that is just should not be underestimated to any extent. And you know, you can have a game plan at the start of the race, but whether it will actually play out to the letter, I would argue probably not, because there's always going to be hurdles, there's always going to be something to overcome through the course of the race, and that's when you rely on the team. You know, the drivers are a pretty significant part of it, but they can only steer the car in the right direction, accelerate and brake in the right points and do the overtaking, but the thinking of where the car needs to be on the racetrack at any one point, into the clear air where possible, that all has to be done by the team. And then of course you've got to think about the preparation necessary ahead of such a long race as this, not least the 4 free practice sessions, but also logistically getting everybody to the track, particularly in the current climate, with all the necessary tools and infrastructure around you, and that there's no surprise that when the checkered flag finally is waved, all of a sudden that emotion and that fatigue catches up with one. And we've seen it year on year so many times. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of stories all unfolding at the same time up and down that pit road. And one or two heart in mouths probably surrounding the incident between Mauro Engel and Daniel Serra. Well, everybody involved there can breathe again, because that has been reviewed by race control and it's deemed that no further action is necessary, so called entirely as a racing incident. It delayed Daniel Serra, but it didn't put him out of the fight for the lead of the race, and he's again glued to the tailpipes of Mauro Engel. So give them a few more laps, and I reckon Serra will try exactly the same thing. He'll put out of his mind what happened previously, and it is a fresh start for the Ferrari to try and mount a challenge on the class-leading Mercedes of Mauro Engel. Jan Heylen, it was 7 seconds the last time I checked. It's grown to now 9 seconds. So Jan unable to live with the speed of both Engel and Serra in the lead of GT Daytona. And Corey Lewis stabilising the gap really to Jan, to remaining at 5 seconds there or thereabouts. And Matty Campbell completes the top 5 in GT Daytona. In GTLM, still 2 Corvettes, with Tommy Milner with a slight advantage over Tonio Garcia, but it's less than a second after 548 laps completed for those 2 Corvettes. The recent Competizione Ferrari is in 3rd, ahead of the best of the BMWs for Brazilian Augusto Farfus. And in LMP2, Mathieu Vaxivière now to the pointy end. So he's got ahead of Kyle Tilley, and Tower Motorsport now lead LMP2. Here we go, Daniel Serra. I told you that he might do this, to the outside of Mauro Engel. Something like a 4th bout of deja vu for me, and he still can't get the move done. But that won't prevent him from trying. And again at the start-finish line, Serra was scored as the race leader. The positions switch back again in favour of the German by 23 thousandths of a second. But this is going to stay nip and tuck, at least to the end of this particular stint, Joe Bradley.
I really do that. Yeah, absolutely. It really is. They are so close on performance. Serra gets the Ferrari ahead across the line, across the tri-oval. But then the Mercedes has the optimum line into turn 1, and that's what we see. He can brake more steadier, if you like, and the car's more stable on the inside line using all the rubber line. And here we go again. They're out onto the banking once again, and Serra will want a time getting up behind and under the rear wing of that Mercedes to use that slipstream effectively. And what we're seeing now is the Mercedes driver having to drive defensively. They're side by side into the bus stop. Not really. It's always been a dubious passing place through that very, very fast section of racetrack. Now, this is where Serra will want to try and get the drive. He's got about 3 car lengths in between himself and the Mercedes, and you'll see the slipstream effect come into play as they come through NASCAR 3, NASCAR 4, or the drag down towards the tri-oval is where the slipstream effect really comes into play. And Serra moving to the right again, ahead of the Mercedes once again. But as we see the cars go into the braking area, it will be the Mercedes that once again, it's deja vu on numerous occasions, Johnny. It's the same act every time we see these cars going through and into turn 1. It's the same placement, it's the same everything. Now what Daniel Serra needs to do, he needs to rethink his tactic and how he's going to get by.
Daniel Serra, who has sealed a full season in the World Endurance Championship for AF Corsa, replacing Davide Rigon. So looking forward to seeing how Serra gets on with a full campaign laid out in front of him. He's done the odd round, was called in to the Bahrain 8 hours last November to replace Davide Rigon, who was busy racing GT3 cars in France. Now Daniel Serra gets a big opportunity with AF Corsa. Well, he's doing his fans no injustice at all here, and backing up really AF Corsa's decision to seal him into the WEC, because to be able to take the fight as he is doing to Mauro Engel is mightily impressive. But I think I agree with Joe in that he maybe has to just start to think about a different way of doing this, because 4 or 5 times he's had an attempt around the outside of the tri-oval and into turn 1 and just can't make it stick. I would argue he only needs maybe a couple more inches of an advantage, and then he should be able to slice across the nose of the Mauro Engel Mercedes. My only worry would be then what Mauro had up his sleeve in terms of a fight back. We've already seen some contact, and it's quite obvious that the Munich Meister is not going to give this GT Daytona lead up without some form of a fight. And Ferrari has massive advantage coming through the tri-oval, but then Engel is perfectly within his rights to use all of the racetrack with the inside line to form that defence, and that's exactly what he does again at the start of lap 535, Joe.
How many times have you said to yourself, I only need a couple of more inches? And that's exactly what Daniel Serra's thinking. And I think what we need now is for Serra to maybe get down the left-hand side of Engel. However, Maro Engel, he's been around the block a few times. He knows exactly what is required to overtake himself. So that's why we see when the car comes out of the bus stop chicane, he's just hugging the yellow line down low on the banking, and he sits on that yellow line and he blocks that entry into turn one.
Yeah, time and time again it is happening, so maybe that thought process is echoing in the mind of Daniel Serra now. How can I start to try and fashion a different line into turn one, or maybe just do it somewhere entirely different? But I can't see the advantage anywhere else on the racetrack for that Ferrari, equal or as good as it is. I don't think he has. That's his only chance to get by, isn't it? And Engel is never going to give up the inside line.
No, and he's going to sit there and he's going to do that lap after lap after lap, and that's what we're going to see. Now, we could be in a situation here where Daniel Serra is just going through the act. He's just playing the game. Both cars on the pit lane at exactly the same time, Johnny.
So now we need to work out how long these drivers have been at the wheel, and whether we're in for another dose of this for another hour-long stint, or whatever these cars can do on fuel. It normally is an hour around this place in a GT Daytona car. So let's have a look. 57 in. Oh, they're virtually side by side to the pit bay as well. They would be just a pit stall apart, wouldn't they? So I'm sure there's been plenty of banter between the teams as well, shouting at a suitably social distance. Some sledging going on between Winward Racing and AF Corsa. And 30 lap stints each. Now, who was in the cars prior to Engel and Serra? I'm struggling here to track back again. It was Engel in the 57, and it was Simon Mann in the 21 car. So Serra's fresh and good to go for another stint, and I'm sure Engel is being kept in the car here as well. Fuel's going in, and the Mercedes is released marginally before the Ferrari, but to be honest, that can probably be made up by Daniel Serra.
It's the battle of the fueling there, wasn't it? Both cars off pit road at exactly the same time, Johnny.
Yeah.
I think we've got Boscun on the line.
Yeah.
Boscun out of the 23, the Harnham Racing Aston Martin. Ross, hopefully you're there, you can hear me. Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
We're good, mate.
Hello.
Your car at the moment, currently 8th in GTD. Tell me, what's the story of the race so far?
To be honest, it's been a fairly smooth race for us. We've not quite had the pace of the front guys, but we're chipping away. We had a couple of little bits of bad luck in terms of cautions and whatever, but we're still in the fight. As you know, at Daytona, anything can happen and things can change very quickly with the caution. So we're plugging away. I think we're about a lap and a half off the lead, and the pace in the last stint didn't look too bad, so pushing on forward.
Now, we've just been watching that battle at the front of your class with the Merc and the Ferrari there, Ross. Give me a driver's perspective on that. It looks, for all intents and purposes, as though Serra is trying all he can to get by. I'm sure that's the case, but surely he's not going to risk everything in a silly move on the Merc.
Yeah, I've literally just got back
in that situation.
Yeah, well, as I said, I've literally just got back to my motor and got the race on in front of me, and I'm watching the battle, and it looks like Serra has got a little bit more straight line speed, and he's doing everything he can to use the side draft, but Engel's defending very, very well. It's a difficult one, really. I think
with 6.5 hours still to go in the race, I think from Sarah's point of view, he just needs to stay where he is and not make any risks. And if he can save things like fuel and also brakes and potentially get it in the stops, because Engel is driving a very, very good defensive line.
That's a good point you make about managing brakes. We talk about tyre management. How much tyre management is going on? Because, it's a very high-speed train, that, isn't it? But just how much are you concerned or conscious of how you're using the tyres during the stint?
For sure, you've got to be pretty careful on the outlap. Obviously, there's no tyre warmers in input, so it's very important not to destroy the surface of the tyre before you've even started the stint. And then, yeah, for sure, you've got to be careful in the infield with the rear tyres. Look after the rears and not spin the rears in the infield. And yeah, it's a massively high stake circuit, but the first few laps on cold tyres are very, very tricky for sure, and it can catch a lot of people out.
The team this year, Ross, sorry, go on, Johnny.
Yeah, just a very quick question. I'm going to be very brave here, Ross, and approach this topic, but I know you, so I feel like I can just have a little chat about events that happened here 12 months ago for you. A certain altercation with the pit wall. Is it a case of wanting to come back to this event to really have closure on what happened in 2020 and fully move on from it?
Yeah, to be honest, it was playing on my mind a little bit before coming to this race. Obviously, for those of you that don't know, I had a bit of a mishap last year on the pit exit, a momentary lapse of concentration, and that was all that she wrote really, and that was the end of the race for us last year, which was bitterly disappointing. But yeah, this year it obviously has been on my mind on pit exit, but it so far it's stood me pretty well. Obviously, having another Aston Martin customer team here as well, they've experienced new tyres this weekend, and they've all said to me that they will never take the mick out of me ever again, because it is very, very tough on the pit exit and also on the first line lap in the cold night time. So far so good, and I haven't had any problems, and we're looking forward to pushing forward for the rest of the race.
Good stuff. Thank you for your candour and your honesty in that reply. It's obviously been slightly on your mind. There's plenty of movement at Aston Martin at this stage. Sadly, no more factory cars in the World Endurance Championship. Where does that put you in your role with the team?
So I'm very fortunate that I've been kept on as a factory driver for this season. There's been a shift of direction in concentration of the business, so we're going to be supporting customers all over the world more, concentrating on customers more, and it's just a bit of a refocus. GT3 racing is looking very, very strong, as is GT4 racing. So I think it's a good time to support our loyal customers that we've had for the last so many years, and keep giving them full support, whether that is with engineers, drivers, or technical support back at Banbury. So we're very lucky to still be in great jobs and doing fantastic races like Daytona is.
One race I think is still absent from your CV, just scanning through it now, is a trip to the Nürburgring on the Nordschleife. You must fancy that one though.
Yeah, so I've done a few VLNs. I did VLA at the end of 2018. I did 2, and but I've never done the 24, and that's definitely something that I want to do very soon. And yeah, it's a pretty mystical place, and certainly a place that I want to have a long future at in the years to come.
Well, there is a near enough permanent Aston Martin suite there, as I'm sure you know, so there's a facility in place. We just need some very smart Aston Martin cars to return to that big old 24-hour race. We've missed them in recent years, but maybe with obviously Formula One is the priority within Aston, but it would be great to have some GT3 cars thundering around the ring once again, and maybe you can be part of it. So what's the plan for the rest of the race? I'm assuming you're down as one of the finishing drivers.
Yes, so I will be back in the car towards the end of the race. Not 100% sure when, but I've still got a good few spins to be left yet. So at the moment, I'm just going to have a relax and drink, and then come back later.
Do you feel across your stints the track's changing a great deal? I mean, that's another amazing thing about a 24-hour race is that the track condition is very fluid, particularly night and then back into day.
Yeah, for sure. It does make a big difference. And as I said, with the lack of tyre warmers here, you know, the nights are very, very difficult, and it does change the balance. And that's, you know, one of the things that I've been trying to work out during this race actually is trying to work different ends of the car that need it more than, you know, than in previous stints because of the temperature drop. So the balance is changing quite a lot, and we're working on that as we speak. But yeah, things are pretty good so far, and there is a big change for sure in the track grip throughout the race. Obviously, it's rubbering in. But at the same time, the cars are also wearing out as well, which is why sometimes you might not always see fastest laps coming towards the end of the race. And I think the actual fastest lap in GTD was set at the start when everything is fresh. But the track for sure is definitely putting up nicely at the moment.
Really good intel there, Ross. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity or taking the time out of your downtime to speak to us. We very much appreciate it, and with many fans of Aston Martin, of course, tuned into RS2 into radio as well. Great stuff. Thanks, Ross.
Cheers. Thank you. Take care.
We wish Ross very much well for the remaining stints that he has to do. The fastest lap that he talks about in the category, actually produced by the Scuderia Corsa Ferrari, which is down in 10th position, the number 63 Ferrari, which has at the wheel at the moment Ed Jones. But as Ross makes the point, that lap was set many hours ago, probably in clear air for the GT Daytona cars. A 1:45.724 is still the best lap within that category. But Mauro Engel's car has done a 1:46.1, and Mauro able to produce pretty close to that actually in the current conditions. Into pit road, Joe Bradley, VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock report now for Pipo Derani. This will be his 31st stop to match his race number.
And I'm being told by the team that I need to check my hearing because my assessment on the strange exhaust note has been denied. Well, I'm standing by my first assessment, and I do think that car has got a problem with the exhaust. However, it doesn't seem to be any detriment. We do know that there was concerns about some rearranged underfloor on that car, but that is what manifested in no issues. And there's no doubt about it that when that car goes by, it's got a different exhaust look than the other Cadillacs. Again, it doesn't seem to be to the detriment of the car's performance. In the 31, NASA now at the wheel of that Whelen Engineering car, and he is currently in fifth by dint of that pit stop. He's back out after that pit stop, Johnny, and back into this race.
Indeed so. Another half an hour of the race ticked off, and we're working our way towards the 6-hour mark, therefore. At 22 the hour, we will be there. Just a quarter of the race still to go at that point, but important just to focus on this stint in hand. Felipe Nasser then taking charge of the 31 car. I suppose that is really the staple response, the expected reply from the team. They're never going to admit that something's wrong with the car or sounding slightly strange, and claim that that's exactly how it's intended to sound.
Take this, Johnny. Of course, teams are listening, and they don't want to give anything away. However, I'm pretty sure the teams would have heard that exhaust note and be fully aware of what what's going on with the 31. They're always monitoring your competitors up and down the pit lane. You're looking at their cars as they come in the pits. I mean, even at this stage, with under 6.5 hours to go, there's still a chance that you want to try and optimise your position to the detriment of the other competitors. That's competitive sport, isn't it? That's what racing's all about.
Yeah, quite right. And yeah, you have one ear on the team radio, and let's hope another ear on RS2 IMSA radio to get a fair reflection on what's happening up and down the order. And, namely in your class, but it's also important to know, for example, where the GT Daytona lead strap is, because they're likely to be two abreast virtually all the way around the lap, and therefore difficult to lap once you get to them in a big DPI or LMP2. Onto pit road also is Dane Cameron. Relatively clear pit road for Dane on this occasion. There's one other car being serviced, which is the Mac Club Team TGM Porsche, car number 64. And apart from that, Jimmy Johnson also heads off the main speedway and into the service area. A little bit of tyre pickup removed from the nose of the number 60 car as well, but nowhere near as bad as to need to switch the nose over. That can be removed by hand and it's sent back into the race. Windscreen tear-off rather removed from the number 48 Ally car. Fuel still going in. Looks like the tyres have been done already, so it's set to go once more with Jimmy Johnson still at the wheel. Didn't see a driver disappearing back into the pits. So Jimmy keen for another 22 odd lap stint. And he'll return in something like 5th position when this all unwinds itself. And the race leader is in as well. And the Konica Minolta outfit couldn't have an easier run into pit road. They are in pit stall number 1, Joe, right next door to the 2 Corvettes. And it's the easiest entry, therefore, to the team. They've got to remember they've got a different car, though, this year, so no longer are they looking for a Cadillac to appear out of Speedway Turn 4, but it's a very sort of stealth-like looking Acura. That unique nose arrangements with the horizontal strip across from left to right to give it a bit of a styling cue from a street Acura.
Yeah, very much distinctive nose that team will be looking at, but also the Konica Minolta livery on the Windtailor racing car has always had, for a few years now, that black livery, very distinctive out on track. That car, I believe I saw a driver change, but Elliot Castroneves showing that he stayed in the car, but I'm pretty sure we saw a driver.
Yeah, I don't think the car's actually
But that car's back out.
pit
Also
lane
out
yet.
is the 01. Sorry, Johnny, go on.
It's Alexander Rossi. There you go, Joe. So you were right. You did see a driver change, and I was incorrect. Yeah. I was incorrect with Jimmy Johnson staying at the wheel of the 48. So apologies. It's actually Simon Pagenaud taking charge of that. So quick was Simon to get on board. I missed it. And NASCAR legend Jimmy Johnson coming to the end of another stint. But the 48 is in contention. Same can be said for the 4 cars ahead of it on the road as well. The 01 for Chip Ganassi, the 10 for Konica Minolta and Wayne Taylor Racing, Felipe Nasser's Whelen Engineering Cadillac, and the Meyer Shank Acura for Olivier Pla. And just about all of those pit stops were carried out seamlessly. Still mightily frustrating for all those involved with Mazda Motorsports, though, Joe. They just cannot get any closer than this 2-lap deficit that they've been carrying for probably 4 or 5 hours now.
I think it's the game that we're playing now, right till the flag is what we're going to see. Let's break away from this because we've got another driver to chat to, giving us another bit of insight. This time we've got Stephen McAleer on the line out of the number 6, the car that's currently running 3rd in LMP3. Stephen, hopefully you can hear me.
We're chasing him, Joe, but
Yeah,
he's not
we're
there quite
chasing him,
yet.
yeah.
Give it another few minutes and Stephen will be there. But
So
Joe's ready with the VP
Stephen's
Racing
back
Fuels
on the
in-app
line.
paddock report. Obviously, obviously drivers having to juggle with their various duties when they're out of the car, and time can disappear very quickly when you have cooled off after a stint, headed back to the motorhome, and then there are various duties, particularly now we're back into firmly daylight hours for the run to the line. So we'll give Stephen another opportunity in the next few minutes to catch up. I'm interested to see what he thinks to an LMP3 car around Daytona in a 24-hour race, just about the longest race that an LMP3 car will have competed in, although there was we think the Thunder Hill event almost certainly had LMP3 cars in, and then there was a question mark as to whether LMP3s had run for this race distance at Silverstone. Now, I remember a 24-hour race that was run for 50% for prototypes, but I'm pretty sure the prototypes in the 24 hours of Silverstone actually got a checkered flag after only 12 hours in that event, so therefore won't have got anywhere close to this race distance, and therefore it's probably only here and Thunderhill where the LMP3s have got their teeth into a 24-hour race, and so far 3 of them are doing brilliantly well. Oliver Askew for Riley Motorsports leads in the 74 car. Wayne Boyd is second for the Sean Creech Motorsport outfit, number 33, and Moritz Krantz for Moomba Motorsports America in the Duquesne DO8 car number 6, running in third. Jeroen Blekemolen in the sister Riley Motorsports car is down in 31st position overall, 4th in class. More importantly, there are 10 GT Daytona cars separating Jeroen from the third place car of Moritz Krantz, so it'll take a little while to work his way through that party of GT Daytona cars, and you have to think they're not necessarily going to be forward in opening the road for Jeroen, so he's going to have to work hard to get through those battling cars. Ed Jones will be the first on his list, followed by Richard Westbrook and Colton Herter, so we'll try and keep tabs on that as the class leader, Ollie Askew, working his way now out of the West Horseshoe. And speaking of LMP3s, there's been a spinner from that class at turn number 6, I make that, car 38, which isn't one of the top 3 cars. It's actually Rasmus Lind in the Performance Tech Motorsports Ligier, which is running in at 6th position in class and can now rejoin. Was I right in suggesting that was turn 6? Yes, up onto the high banks now to Speedway turn 1, and Rasmus Lind is back into the race. Still chasing Stephen McAleer, so fingers crossed we will get him to air as soon as possible, as Tristan Vautier in the number 5 car returns to the racetrack. The 7th placed DPI Cadillac still a long way away from any of its buddies, if you like, within that division. The race started with 7 DPIs. It's most impressive and testament to the strength and reliability of the cars in that category that we've got 6 still at the sharp end of the timing screen, and just the one difficulty for the number 5, which was actually assessed as its fault. Car 5 at the time was being driven by Tristan Vautier when there was a clash with Jan Halen in the number 16 Porsche, which pitched the Wright Motorsports 911 into a spin, and there was a secondary impact. This all took place at turn number 1, and as the Porsche spun through 180 degrees, it then, in a backwards motion, T-boned the number 5 car and put the 5 behind the wall for lengthy repair work to the left-hand side pod. That happened deep into the night. I remember when Joe was on with me here in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. Jeremy Shaw was part of that portion of the broadcast as well, and will rejoin us, by the way, a little bit later on. We've got, roughly speaking, another hour and a half or so with myself, Johnny Palmer, and Joe will be keeping me company for some of that as well. At which point
we were
John
about
Hindhaugh
to talk,
will take
Johnny,
over.
about...
Yes, Joe.
Johnny, we were about to talk about the Mazda, weren't we? and about that damage limitation run that the car was in after losing that time very early in the race. And I was about to make a comment with regards to just how difficult a task it is. It was 3 laps down after that initial delay. It's now clawed that deficit back to 2 laps. However, this race is such an optimised 24-hour race. What I mean by that is it's nigh on flat out for the whole 24-hour race, and you'll find that the lead cars, there's very little in it, and it's kind of we've mentioned this before, the leaders keep a holding pattern without overdoing it, and they're pretty much running optimised every lap, nursing the car, nursing the brakes, nursing the tyres. We've heard drivers mention this, and for the Mazda Motorsports team to then pull a fast one, the only way they can really do that is by a bit of luck when it comes to pit stopping, maybe pit stopping right on a yellow flag, just before a yellow flag period comes out, so that they soak up less time in the pits. You need something like that. You need the planets to align, and that really is a massive ask. And so, you know, team at Mazda, they've been there, they've done this before, they've got many t-shirts with regards to this situation, and they will continue running around as fast as they can and hope that the planets do align, and they'll be in a position to take advantage of that very thing.
Yeah, as you say, it's one thing finding 1 lap to get back to the lead position, or the all-important lead lap, but then you've got to find 2 more. So they were doubly snookered, were Mazda Motorsports. But the question, as Joe says, is waiting for the next caution, maybe getting a single lap back again, and then you've only got 1 more to find, and that really is a big psychological boost. It is not impossible for Mazda still to get a podium in this race, and some very unusual circumstances could even present an opportunity to win it. But they would need an awful lot of luck heading to their side, Joe.
Andy Cotton, editor of Race Car Engineering, that they're getting their situations perhaps exacerbated because the leaders have been going out of sequence with regards to their pit stop windows. So it's going to be very hard for them to read as to how to get back on and in touch with those leaders. Thanks for that, Andy.
Yeah, there's no definite right time to be pitting. I suppose early on in this race, you get that sense of a rhythm. Cars come in roughly on the same lap. If they've got 2 cars in the entry and they're in next door pit stalls, then they'll deliberately pit them on alternate laps. But they, early in the race, generally only are a maximum of a lap apart. But we are well away from that now in terms of the leaders. Elliot Castroneves and Kevin Magnussen, to go against what I've just said, are due to pit on the next lap. However, the same lap the next time they come in. Felipe Nasr will have pitted 3 laps before that, I make it, and then you've got Olivier Pla and Simon Pagenaud on a different cycle again. They are somewhere between the 2, expected in a lap prior to the race leaders. So yes, it's awkward to judge from a Mazda Motorsports point of view, and therefore maybe even more reason to concentrate entirely on their own race, and then just keep your fingers crossed that you can keep it neat and tidy, and a little bit of luck does head your way. They're certainly due some, and their preparation for this race couldn't have been better, it seems, because Harry Tincknell was interviewed here on RS2 IMSA Radio during the night practice, a session they decided to sit the majority of out, and they did feature in FP4, but only from memory in the start of it, where they did about 5 laps and then parked the car. They were that confident that they'd done everything, all the job list was complete, and they were raring to go for the race, but haven't necessarily had the performance that they expected from the opening stints, and then they hit the trouble, which put them laps behind. While out of the Bostock chicane goes Felipe Nasr in the Whelen Engineering Cadillac, running in 3rd, and he's got Kevin Magnussen in sight for the 2nd placed position. It's much further down the road, Alexander Rossi going very strongly in the Konica Minolta Acura. 5 laps away from the 600 lap marker. That will put us back ahead of the 800 lap marker. Now, it seemed pretty obvious from about quarter distance that we weren't going to be in the ballpark to go further than we managed 12 months ago. 833 laps, the record distance, remember. But we've been sort of flirting with just slightly fewer than and now slightly more than 800 laps as the predicted range to reach by 3:40 this afternoon. By the way, local time just gone 25 minutes past 9 in the morning at Daytona. I make it 803 laps as the predicted mileage currently, which means 208 laps to go, but that could change at any moment. But it's getting tight now, isn't it, Joe, for second and third with Jan Magnussen, Jan Magnussen. Oh, there's that first mistake.
Oh,
Kevin
that's the first time, Johnny.
I think it is.
That's $1 in the jar. That's $1 in the jar. It's only got $1 in it, though. I'm amazed that.
You know, I said another well-known line at the start of the race, some reference to how much time there was still to go. That's not the line, so it doesn't therefore mean another $1 in the jar. But I did terribly in terms of uttering that phrase, I think, in my opening stint. And now I've said Magnussen Senior rather than Junior, but that was always going to happen, I think. Many races I've called in the past with Sebastian Priaulx in the race and called him Andy. It's just force of habit. But I'll get there eventually. Tired minds, that's my excuse. At 9:30 in the morning.
Talking about that battle at the front of the field, let's get some absolute insight into this. I've got Renger van der Zande on the line. Renger, can you hear me?
Yeah, of course. How are you guys?
Brilliant. We're great, mate, and it's great to talk to you. We've just been speculating as to just what sort of finish we've got in store for the final 24 hours. What's it like being at the front of it and the thick of it?
I mean, it's pretty crazy, man. So far, we have so many moments where the bus stops get rolled off and we're supposed to get out of the bus stop. That's when you are sitting duck and people fly by. So, you know, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not lucky. So, but we've been able to get to the lead a few times, many times. So, the car is running okay. I feel the Acuras picked up some speed overnight. So, hopefully we can have a good go at it at the end. But it's so competitive. It's very very tight and everything. And I think BY has done a good job because I think there's many cars who can win this race today.
Renger, you're no stranger to the top step of the podium at this race. When exactly, without giving too much away, when exactly do you think you guys are going to go, right, let's go for it? Is it going to be 3 hours to go, 2 hours to go, 20 minutes to go? When should we be looking out for that?
No, it's so tight that any last yellow, that's going to be the decider. So if that's with 20 minutes to go, and you know, with 30 minutes to go, it's only a short yellow. It's not going to be a long yellow. So you better be ready for that last half hour to, you know, put the knife between the teeth and go for it. So it's, I think, you know, to be honest, from the beginning, the get-go, people were wheel banging and driving their asses off and taking a lot of risk already. I was kind of surprised with that. Kind of sit back and looked at it all, and I was able to drive to the lead at that point anyway. So people were running wide and all that, but so far it's been one big sprint race really. So pretty cool at the same time.
You're an experienced pair of hands in endurance racing, Renger. You've got two, what I can only describe as hot shots. You've got Kevin Magnussen, just out of Formula One. You've got Scott Dixon, an IndyCar legend. Both drivers more familiar with sprint racing and having a very selfish attitude. How have you found these two guys to work with regards to, you know, compromising the setup, for instance? And it's a completely different sport, isn't it, endurance racing to IndyCar and Formula One?
Yeah, it is. It is different, and you know, you don't have to tell Scott what he needs to do, and he knows exactly what to do, and he also understands the concept of team racing. You know, racing as a team. So within Ganassi, I think anyway they look at that. You know, Chip says there's no dumb questions, for example. That's something what brings the philosophy within the team that hey, we're here together and let's make the most out of what we have and what we can do. And I think Scott grew up in Chip Ganassi racing, so I'm just a big fan of Scott, really. And Kevin, I think he had a dad who has been here for 22 years, so I think he told, you know, Jan told Kevin exactly how it's going here, and I think Kevin is very low ego in general, so it's been working really nicely together. It's been really good so far with them.
Renger, it's Johnny. Very easy. Sorry.
Very easy, and it's down to you, the Dutch and the Danish having very similar personality traits.
Yeah, it is. I think the Danish and the Dutch are kind of similar. They're not far from each other anyway, so that might be part of it. They're a little bit more Scandinavian, but I think you're right. The Dutch and the Danish are a little similar, but yeah, it's been really good. We've only started working this week, right? So he had a baby 2 weeks ago, so he stayed away for the factory visit that I did together with Scott. And then I met him here in Daytona, and I know Kevin from the past, so on that perspective, it's already quite easy to talk with him. But you know, and the other thing is like getting kids is changing your life, as all of you know probably. But this is something also a big topic during this weekend, of course, when I got his kid. So it's been really nice.
Renger, it's Johnny Palmer joining Joe Bradley in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre here on IMSA Radio. I just wanted to ask you whether a certain thought has crossed your mind, because you look back at the overall win in 2019, your name is there. 12 months ago, you did it again. A hat-trick of wins around this place is an incredibly rare thing. Have you even begun to sort of think that might be possible, or is it best to put it out of your mind?
I mean, statistically, it's impossible, right? So, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. So let's see.
Does it add any extra pressure, knowing that there's another Rolex on the line, or is it just the same as it was when you first did this race?
No, it just feels like I don't know what's going to happen in the last 6 hours, but it just feels like there's many more cars who can win this race right now. Last year we were dominating. This year we've been really good, we've not been dominating. So I think there's many cars who can win this race right now. So it's so tight, So I think that's something what's going to make a difference, you know. So in this year's edition, that the one who's yet to be almost kind of lucky to win this one, you know, with the traffic and all that. But you know, every time Scott showed up last year, we won. So he's our lucky charm.
Maybe it's as simple as that at the end of the day. Has there been a little bit of banter during race week with your old friends at Konica Minolta, now that they've changed their car? But of course you took the 2 titles with that team in 19 and 20.
Yeah, I'll just race them a little harder than the rest of the field, that's all.
Okay, maybe keep the conversation to a minimum. Thank you, Renger. We'll let you concentrate on the job in hand, because it's a big one, and you're well in this fight, with K-Mag currently running in second place and only 5 seconds off the tail of Alexander Rossi. Brilliant to hear from you, though. Thank you for taking the time to chat to us here on IMSA Radio, Renger.
Same to you guys, and always a pleasure. It's always nice to see you guys. See you later. See you at the end.
Excellent. Indeed, see you at the end, and let's hope it's a good result for Chip Ganassi Racing, although we have no favourites here on RS2 IMSA Radio, remaining entirely neutral and calling the race as it unfolds, with the 10 car that I suppose you could say was the team, but not the car that Renger van der Zandt ran with 12 months ago. He's now firmly ensconced in the Chip Ganassi Racing outfit, with Scott Dixon and Kevin Magnussen, the aforementioned. Felipe Nasser still running in third, with Olivier Pla and Simon Pagenaud completing the top 5. So, yeah, actually Tim Gray, our executive producer up in London, making the point that 3 wins in not necessarily sequential years is less rare, but the point is that it will be back-to-back victories. So Well, that's the nature of a hat-trick, isn't it? It's not a hat-trick in cricket unless you do it in 3 sequential balls. So that was my definition of hat-trick, but anyway, there we are. The BMW heads out of turn 6 and up onto the high banks, the 25 BMW of Team RLL, and around the outside of the 75 Sun Energy 1 Gradient Racing run Mercedes. Also at the same time as GTLM overtaking GT Daytona traffic, there was a prototype that needed to nip through and into the bus stop as well. The bus stop, Joe, on paper looks to be a relatively simple run through a left and a right kink. However, you add traffic, and in that case 3 different classes worth of traffic, and it can be very, very hairy indeed.
It's all about race car dynamics, Johnny. It's about changing direction. It's about shifting that weight in the chassis and coming off a very high-speed piece of racetrack and then braking in a straight line, turning the car left, immediately then turning it right, and then firing it out the chicane. That's where the skill comes in for just timing that weight transference and making that transition from putting the weight on the right-hand side of the car and then transitioning to the left. That's what race car driving is all about. It's all about the middle ear, it's all about the balance, and would you believe it's all about the feel through your backside. And any race driver will tell you that. It's all about the feel in the car. You have to become as one with the car and feel its every move and feel that weight transference. And that's what makes good drivers great drivers, the ones who can do that better. And that bus stop chicane here at Daytona is perhaps, again, there's so many parts of this track that look on paper to be, well, that looks like a doddle. It's just, straightforward right-hander. But, even the infield hairpins are tricky because of the way the track is cambered. There's adverse camber on the outside of both of those infield hairpins. The transition out of the infield and onto the banking, very, very tricky corner just to get maximize your acceleration. And then running down to the bus stop chicane, which started the conversation, it kind of looks like a passing place, and some people will try it there, but it's a very tricky place to pass. Not one of my favourites, and not one of favourites of many that I know. But you know what, Johnny, if it would be easy, we'd all be doing it.
Quite right. That's the voice of Joe Bradley. I'm Johnny Palmer, and we're both in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre bringing you live coverage of the 2021 edition of the Rolex 24 of Daytona. Amazingly, the 59th time that this race has been run, and you tune to IMSA Radio, part of the Radio Show Limited network of channels right here on RS2. You can get in touch, remember, at IMSA Radio on social media. Make sure you use the hashtag R24Radio, R24Radio, and the tweets will find their way to us. The latest Mazda in-race update then sees Alexander Rossi in his Acura lead the way in car number 10. And he has a lead of 4.8 seconds over Kevin Magnussen's Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac car 01. Third position is the Felipe Nasser Whelen Engineering Racing Cadillac for the Brazilian driver, number 31. And then Olivier Pla is fourth for the Meyershank Racing squad with Curb Agajanian in the second of the Acuras. In fifth place, it's Simon Pagenaud for Ally Cadillac Racing, number 48. The Harry Tincknell Mazda remains now only 1 lap down, I noticed. So the 55 car has been on the move since I last checked. Now that might just be a quirk of the timing system. Will allow Rossi to cross the line again, and it may revert to 2 laps once more. But Harry Tincknell certainly going in the right direction in terms of trying to gather that lost ground back up again. In LMP2, a bank of 5 cars run 7th to 11th in overall position. Mathieu Vaxivière for Tower Motorsport leads in car 8, that's an Oreca, as is the Era Motorsport Kyle Tilley driven number 18, second, and Christopher Mies for Dragon Speed is third, also in an Oreca 07. Then it's Sven Muller in the best of the Ligiers in LMP2, running in 4th place for car 51. GTLM has a Corvette leading and a Corvette in second for Nick Tandy and Jordan Taylor, car 43. Then it's John Edwards for the BMW Team RLL squad with the best of their M8s. Third for car 24. Davide Rigon is fourth, number 62. And in fifth place, it's Timo Glock, also in a BMW for Team RLL. Oliver Askew in the LMP3 category continues to lead for Riley Motorsports. He's got a Ligier JS P320. That's car 74. Ahead of Wayne Boyd, also in a Ligier, and Moritz Krantz for Mühlner Motorsports, car number 6. And in GT Daytona, Daniel Serra finally getting ahead of Mauro Engel in the AF Corsa Ferrari. The 21 machine tried several times to get in front of the Germans' Mercedes, and to no avail. But now the Ferrari enjoys, well, half a second. So the question is he actually ahead of him on the track? Because a number of times they've been through the tri-oval, Serra's been scored as the leader, and then you look against the infield and it's still the Mercedes in front. It might be that scenario again, quite frankly, but I can only tell you how the timing screen's telling me 21 leads 57. Andrea Caldarelli for the Lamborghini Huracan is in third, car 1, ahead of Trent Hidman for Wright Motorsports and a Porsche number 16 fourth, and Laurence Vantor also for Porsche, and this time for Pfaff Motorsports in fifth. That's the latest Mazda in-race update, and there are another 6 hours to go here on RS2 IMSA Radio. Now we get to the complex points in the race, where the MEC points are awarded. Now, Shea Adam is always on top of this sort of thing, but so what have we had? 18 hours done, yeah, so 3/4 distance, and therefore a milestone for the Endurance Cup points to be awarded. They're not as big as the overall points that we get to the end of the campaign, but spreadsheets galore with Shea, and I'm probably going to wait until she's worked it all out and is back on air in just over an hour's time to deliver who stands where. But, points are awarded at various positions or various points in the 24 hours. Brilliant, she's going to send it along once they are published, and I presume that Alcamel, the timing company that look after things here at the Daytona 24 Hours, will produce a document as well to let us know who is in the leading position as far as that's concerned. Leading position overall on the racetrack, slightly easier to read. It's Alexander Rossi, but now by only 2.9 seconds. So Kevin Magnussen is chiselling away at that gap, and readily. So they'll be very far away from a neck-and-neck battle for the lead of the race. It's also very tight in GTLM for John Edwards and Davide Rigon, who are heading into turn number 6. Nothing between those two cars. Maybe a BMW length, and that is about it. Heading up onto the high banks for yet another time. And GTLM has just remained as close as it ever was, really, Joe. In fact, 4 seconds, I think, represents the biggest gap we've had for the last 5 or 6 hours between the two Corvettes. Still absolutely nothing.
It's settled down though, hasn't it? We had 4 cars pretty much nose to tail. It's settled down insofar as the two Corvettes, the leading number 4, it's now got a gap of about 4 seconds. Nick Tandy at the wheel of that. The number 3 at the wheel, 4 seconds is the deficit there, and then Jordan Taylor has got 9 seconds to the BMW of John Edwards, who pretty much has got Davide Rigon breathing down his neck in the 62 Ferrari, and that's the actual on-race battle, on-track battle that we can keep an eye on. However, on saying that, Johnny, a 9-second gap from the BMW to the first of the Corvettes, and then a further 4 seconds, is absolutely nothing. And all that would take is tripping over a slower car, getting through traffic, and then that race can be spread out and could be a completely different look to what we are looking at right now. So it's everything's still to play for, and everybody's still pushing without risk, I think is the term I've overly used this weekend.
You're in good company, though, with a certain leading game master of that statement. Just a slight feather in the throttle I noticed there from Darren Turner in the 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, well aware that 2 GTLM cars wanted to get by just before the kink at 4, and he allowed them the real estate in order to do that. So the Aston Martin has a 90-second gap. No, beg pardon, 40-second gap to Michael Grenier in the Sun Energy 1 Mercedes. So DT, I was right first time, it is a 90-second gap, in fact, to Colton Herta So Aston Martin chasing Turner Motorsport BMW. That's probably where the confusion crept in. Darren Turner and Turner Motorsport, with Michael Grenier in the 75 Sun Energy 1 car running in 6th position. Tightest battle in GT Daytona remains for the race lead, though, which is how we like it. AF Corsa Ferrari Daniel Serra definitely ahead of Maro Engel now on the road, and leading by 1.8 seconds. Ferrari versus Mercedes at the sharp end of GT Daytona. Andrea Caldarelli remains in 3rd position. There's another pit stop for the Whelen Engineering Cadillac. Pretty swift turnaround there. Philippe Nasser brought it in, and I believe stays at the wheel as well. It was such a quick stop, I'm not sure they could have got a driver in and out at that sort of speed. Into pit road comes John Edwards, by the way, and he sits on board the number 24 BMW whilst the team work rapidly around him to change Michelin tyres. It is indeed Philippe Nasser who stays at the wheel of 31. Back into the race in 5th position. I'm very interested in how Harry Tinkle's getting on here, because he's 2 minutes and 58 seconds away from the Nasser Cadillac. It'll be closer than that now that Felipe has made his stop, and that is less than 2 laps around here. 2 laps will take you over the 3-minute mark, and Tinkle's got it down to less than that, far less than that, to the next car. So it's a lap deficit to Felipe Nasser, therefore a lap deficit to the overall race leader as well. So persistence is key, as we have mentioned. Car 55, I would wager, has got 2 of its 3 laps back again now. Stellar work from Mazda Motorsports, and they are now very much in the envelope, the operating window, to gain that final lap back, perhaps in the next caution. Surely we've got a bank of there being at least one more caution, remaining 5 hours and 51 minutes. We've managed to run for the last hour and nearly 45 minutes without one, mind you. And that one was a pretty swift affair at 18.5 minutes in duration. Prior to that, we'd had over an hour's worth of green flag running. And the other side of the previous caution to that, it was an hour and 23. The longest green flag run I make as 3 hours and 49, nearly 50 minutes. And that happened after we had some 4 cautions relatively close to one another within the first 3 hours, and then finally we got almost 4 hours of green after that. And the cautions, though fairly regular, have been pretty infrequent, I would suggest. On average, about an hour apart, and we're almost close to 2 hours now being clear of those pesky yellows. And this is a useful time for the teams to really work out where they are in terms of speed and pace, and back timing to the end of the race as well. We're possibly still a bit too far out from 3:40 for doing that, bearing in mind that the DPIs will be doing 40-odd minute stints, maybe slightly more. So there's still a lot of 40 minutes to the end of the race. And you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself, as we've said on several occasions. Tear off not being removed from the number 60 car. Instead, a wipe of the windshield will suffice for the Sirius XM sponsored number 60 Meyer Shank Racing Acura. And Olivier Pla will stay at the wheel of that car. Also in for another pit stop on lap number 608 is the Ally Cadillac racing car of Simon Pagenaud. And rejoining in the Mazda, Harry Tincknell. Now, is this the point where he goes back to 2 laps down? I think it is. So it was because he owed us a pit stop that was throwing me slightly off. Gained the lap because everybody ahead of him has made the stop, and he hadn't. And order is restored.
Leaders in as well, Johnny.
Yes, Joe, you're watching that stop.
Just ahead of the 60 and the 48, Olivier Pla, Simon Pagenaud. We've got Kevin Magnussen coming in, Alex Rossi also in. They are the 2 leading cars. The Chip Ganassi Cadillac of Kevin Magnussen taking on tyres and also Alexander Rossi getting off the pit apron first. However, that's by dint of it being at pit in. That was
Joe, we're going to head to a VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock report now because
go ahead, Johnny.
yeah, well, I'll let you dictate it, being our VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock member, because João Barbosa now joins us on the line here at RS2 IMSA Radio.
Excellent, João. Great that we've managed to contact you. Hopefully you can hear us okay.
Yeah, no problem. I can hear you fine.
Brilliant. It's thanks for getting in touch with us. Your car currently running in the LMP3 class, sharing the car, 33 car, isn't it? That you're down to run, I believe. The Screech, the Sean Screech Motorsport. The question I want to ask is, it might be an awkward one, you might not know the answer, but it kind of happened in front of us and we didn't notice, but your car dropped away from the leading LMP3 car, and I'm finding it hard to fathom out why.
That's a good question. Because when we lost that time, we did a mandatory 8-minute stop, and I was actually sleeping. So when I got back to the pits, we were a few laps back. So I'm not really sure how that happened. Maybe minutes just run really quick. We lost a few laps. We did the stop on the yellow, which shouldn't be that bad, and we did the pretty quick stop, considering we had to change brakes. But I was a little bit surprised, but still 6 hours to go. We still have a full Watkins Glen race to go, and still a lot can happen.
Yeah, very much. We get carried away, don't we, when we see 6 hours to go. We think we're nearly there, but we're very much not. Joe, you're very experienced at this race. You are more familiar name in the DPI category, but this year sees you in an LMP3, albeit it's a prototype, but a very different prototype. Can you take us through the major differences in the cars?
Actually, it is very different. Obviously, we have less aero, less power, and less brakes. We still use the steel brakes, and DPIs, they use the carbon brakes. So that's a huge difference there. Power-wise, it's a big difference. And also in aerodynamics, this car is not as good as the DPI. But overall, it's really fun to drive. It makes good racing. And it's running really good. People were expecting for the cars not to be as strong as they are, but the team has done a great job in preparing the car, and it's running very strong. We haven't missed a beat yet.
And how have you found dealing with traffic? Because the lap time, a well-driven LMP3 car is kind of on a par with a GTLM car, and the lap times are very similar, but both of those categories of cars produce that lap time in a very different way. And we've seen some problems with the LMP3s and the GTLMs. Have you found that to be the case?
It's a big challenge for sure, because like you said, we do the lap time in different parts of the track, and our cars, everybody's taking really careful, taking as much time as possible, because the cars, nobody really knows if the cars can handle really close contact racing, and the TT cars, they're very strong, very reliable, so and they push us around, so they're really quicker on the straights than we are, and if they feel we're gonna slow them down at all, they just block you, and it just makes racing very interesting on my side, very different from what I'm used to. I'm not used to deal with overtaking cars and being overtaken by faster class, but it's I'm having a blast so far, so it's running very good. The car is fun to drive. This class, different classes, I'm in the middle of everything, so it's very busy all the time, so it's a good experience.
Excellent. Now, tell me about the psychology of where you're at. You're a few laps down off the leader. What's the strategy? How do you guys go about the final 5 hours and 43 minutes is on the clock? What approach do you take to the final stages of this race?
We're gonna do the same approach as
we've taken this far. Just trying to keep the car clean, no contact, and try to stay straight, try to avoid all kinds of problems, and be very conservative for now. 6 hours is still a long way to go, and we don't have the outright speed compared to the 74. We're a little bit down on top speed. We might be carrying a little more aero, so they're a little quicker than us. So we'll see. We'll see. We just need to keep doing our job like we've been doing so far, keeping our nose clean, and we'll see what happens at the end.
Thank you, Joe. We wish you all the very best of luck with the rest of this race, but I've got one out-of-the-box question before you go. You're a familiar name that I see iRacing most afternoons. You're a big sim racing fan, so I've got a question that all of the sim racers out there who indeed last weekend were probably competing in the iRacing Daytona 24 hours, just how close is that sim to being here and racing for real?
I might be a little bit the old school, right? I mean, the sim is really good to keep, especially to keep your mind sharp and to get you used to run like long stints and keep the concentration up, because it's very tough. The sim is very tough. If you lose a little bit your focus, you're completely out, and that's not easy for sure. It's a big help on that perspective. Driving wise, it's really a good help, and understanding the car, the track. If you haven't been to a new track, it's really good to do that. But feeling-wise, I mean, there's nothing that can compare to a real car, right? iRacing, they've done a tremendous job. It's as close as you could get, I think. But when you don't have the real seat, when you don't feel the car on your butt, it's very difficult to reproduce that feeling. So I'm still drive a lot by feel, a lot by what the car tells me, and not just by visual. That's what a lot of the kids nowadays are doing. So I still missing on the iRacing. I still miss that part. It's impossible to reproduce.
Joe, that's great insight. I'm sure all of our iRacing fans there appreciate that insight. I want to thank you very much for talking to us. We'll let you go now, and the very best of luck with the rest of this race, and give everyone all our very best at Sean Creech Motorsport, will you?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and you guys doing a great job, and let's see how this race is going to finish.
He was a race winner in 2018. That's Joao Barbosa chatting to Joe Bradley, and our latest VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock report. Thanks to Joe Barbosa, and we'll look forward to seeing him later in this event. It's the 59th edition of the Rolex 24 at Daytona, with Joe Bradley and Johnny Palmer in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. Don't forget, you can get in touch. IMSA Radio is the social media handle to aim your tweets and other such things towards, and make sure you include the hashtag R24Radio as well. As we reach another hour in terms of ticking over into the 10th hour of the day, that is, and there are 18 hours and 20 minutes gone in the race. So 1 minute past 10 on the eastern seaboard, with near perfect conditions, it would appear. No hint of any rain on the horizon just yet. And down towards the first couple of corners go battling GT Daytona cars, with Nicholas Nielsen now installed in the AF Corsa Ferrari 488 GT3 and leading Philip Ellis by 0.8 of a second. Just hearing about a possible drama for the Turner BMW number 96, which was spotted running slow through Speedway Turn 3. It's got to the pits, but it looked like the rear left was rubbing and actually manifested itself into a puncture. So that was the reason why the car was going slowly, and the car has already returned to the race. So that was Colton Herter who had to come in for an unscheduled stop. The team dealt with it very, very quickly. I suppose they had ample warning with the news from the spotters, and also Colton, no doubt, on the radio as well, to say he would be pit bound to sort that issue out. But rear tyre failure is easily straightened by a team as experienced as Turner Motorsport, and not too much time lost there. However, much more of a story developing, Joe Bradley, for car 31. Felipe Nasser has brought the Whelen Engineering Cadillac in. Now, you and I were chatting about questions about the floor of that car, and you, of course, had heard the different engine note being produced from that car. The team maintain that's exactly as it should sound. However, the car's in the pits and is now the wrong side of the wall.
Completely different issue. It's Felipe Nasser has brought the car in. It's stuck in third gear and it's gone behind the wall. And being stuck in third gear is never a good thing. Being stuck in any gear is never a good thing, Johnny. It's kind of what the problem is internally in the gearbox, and if they're so minute tolerances within these race gearboxes that literally you can't risk anything. So that car is kind of out of contention now, and it's only been in the pits behind the wall a few minutes. But for any kind of gearbox issue, they're going to have to get the car out of gear and then see if the car will actually transition through the gears up and down the box once they've freed that up.
Well, how quickly, as we've been saying so many times, a race can change complexion for one particular team. 31 well in the hunt to that point. But even though a trip behind the wall doesn't necessarily mean you are out of the race, the difficulty for them is that they've hit this issue inside the final 6 hours, so there's virtually no time to try and catch up again. If this had happened in the opening 6 hours, it might have been a different story. But as Joe makes the point as well, a gearbox issue is going to mean a lengthy period of time in the garage, and Whelen will be up for the challenge here to sort the problem out. Whelen Engineering Racing. But it takes the 31 car, if not out of the race, certainly out of contention, as Joe has just said. And it perhaps brings Harry Ticknell slightly towards, well, it does, one place closer to the podium. He's still a lap away from the race lead. Now, he has done the pit stop that he owed compared to everybody else. When he comes in for the 31st time, that will probably drop him again 2 laps away. But that Mazda, for me, is inching just that little bit closer with every lap to the 4 DPIs that are now ahead of it. Alexander Rossi leading the race, Kevin Magnussen second, and only a 1/10 of a second away from the race leader. Olivier Pla is third, and in 4th position Simon Pagenaud, as the Liqui backed Turner Motorsport BMW had to straight line the bus stop chicane on that lap. And remember, that car has just had a new rear Michelin tyre fitted to it after a slow puncture, or a complete puncture, was detected. So it was Colton Herta, wasn't it, brought the car in and took it back out again. Neck and neck for the lead through the tri-oval. It's the 10 car to the outside, it's the 0-1 to the inside. Alexander Rossi just about hanging on to it, as clipping the dust there on the inside of turn 2 is Kevin Magnussen in car 0-1. They also had the Heart of Racing Aston Martin to nip by safely, which they have done through turn 2A. And in and out of the International Horseshoe. This is really livening up. 5.5 hours there may still be to go, but we have got a ding-dong scrap, Joe Bradley, at the sharp end of the field between 2 stellar sports car drivers. Kevin Magnussen, less experienced, okay, than Alexander Rossi, but that does not stop him going completely the other side of a BMW from GT Daytona to try and gain the advantage.
You've got 2 single-seater hot shots coming together at the Daytona 24 hours. It's not an unfamiliar sight, is it, to see these 2 young drivers going at it tooth and nail. They are at the top of their game, and what we're going to see now, just sit back, enjoy this, and it's going to be all about getting through the traffic. And as we go into the bus stop chicane, 2 cars ahead of them. We've got a Porsche just ahead, followed by a Ferrari. He gets around the Porsche just on pure acceleration and momentum out of the bus stop chicane. He make swift work, both cars making swift work of both the Porsche and the Ferrari as they come out of Speedway turn 4 and down that straight to the tri-oval. Magnussen will want to try and get some kind of slipstream effect going into the braking area, and he does indeed. Looks to the inside, but no. Rossi had the momentum and takes the conventional textbook line there, JP.
Fantastic to witness, though, and it reminds me somewhat of the scrap we were enjoying in GT Daytona a few hours ago between Maro Engel and Daniel Serra. Eventually the Ferrari did get in front in that particular class and is still being led by Nicholas Nielsen. But a sort of similar scenario. I would say that Kevin Magnussen's got more opportunities around the lap to be able to pull off the overtake, though, because that second-placed Cadillac looks very, very strong, and the Acura in certain places is having to defend mightily in order to keep Kevin Magnussen behind as he four-wheel drifts the 0-1 car into turn 6 to give it much tighter route through the apex and therefore on the exits. So he was able to apply the pressure, the throttle in more of a straight line than the Acura, which was heading up onto the high bank, and this could be Magnussen's opportunity. He's going to have to do it the difficult way around the outside. Can he brake later? Yes, he can. That for me is one of the overtakes of the race, so long as he can keep it on the road. But no, he can't. He's run too deep into the bus stop chicane, and Alexander Rossi takes the place back again. But brilliant understanding between the two of them. That was high-risk motorsport with 5.5 hours still to go in this race, and Magnussen, ultimate faith in the braking capacity of this Cadillac. He almost got the move done there, but Rossi, slightly more experienced around this place, I think sensed that Magnussen was carrying too much forward momentum into the bus stop, knew he was probably going to end up out in the weeds, and just eased out of the throttle to allow Magnussen to make that very slight error. And of course now what Magnussen's done is put dirt on his tyres, and it's going to take a bit of time to maintain optimum lap speed once again. But that was a brilliant half overtake, I'm going to call it.
He was through that bus stop chicane, Johnny. He was kind of out of control, and it was the ultimate skill of a driver like Kevin Magnussen that kept that car on the track, or barely on the track. I know he put a huge amount of wheel off. By coming around the outside of Rossi, he was actually making that first part of the bus stop chicane more of a corner than it actually is. You can take a much shallower line into there, and Rossi was on that. He saw Magnussen coming around his outside and thought, there you go, mate, you have a go. And Magnussen was so skillful in gathering it up. They're out onto Speedway turn 2 now and heading down towards the bus stop again. I don't think we're going to get a repeat of what we've just seen, Johnny, as Magnussen has dropped away. He's lost a bit of time there with completely losing his momentum through the bus stop. And as you said, probably getting a bit of detritus on that rear right wheel, which completely compromised him on that lap. But I'm pretty sure it's not going to be long before we see Magnussen challenging Rossi again. This is just like fist fight, isn't it? This is fabulous. Two of the world's fastest single-seater drivers into this Daytona 24 hours in the fastest sports cars we have in the IMSA series, and they are absolutely flat out at this stage of the race.
The application of their aerodynamic knowledge and how that applies to a open wheel, a single-seater race car being adapted very slightly for roof overhead two-seater prototypes, but it's pretty much the same science beneath it all, and you have to have ultimate faith that the car is going to stop in time, particularly when you get such a good run out of Speedway turn 1. Well, it all began actually on the route into 6 for me, for Kevin Magnussen. He's still possibly just a bit too far away. It depends about, well, we're going to go into a caution now, so that is going to prevent these guys from performing the overtake. It's a full course yellow because of some debris on the front straight, so unrelated to this incident and this fight, but debris has been spotted and therefore the yellows are going to come out. A real shame, because I was enthralled by that battle, but safety of course is paramount. This, I make it, will be our 10th caution of the race so far, and we had 2 hours, 3 minutes and 48 seconds of green flag running to this point. Not quite, well, actually nowhere near the longest portion of green, which happened much earlier on, 3 hours and 50 minutes of it. debris.
Johnny, this would be an exceptional race to watch if these guys were down the field. The fact that it's for the overall lead of the Daytona 24 Hours just makes what we're seeing now a little bit of history. We're gonna talk about this. There are lots of Daytona 24 Hours. I remember Felipe Nasr and Fernando Alonso that I watched racing wheel to wheel very similar to this, that I can still visualize in my mind, and I'm still going to be able to do that with this one. Kevin Magnussen, Alexander Rossi, absolutely flat out battling for the overall lead of this race. This is something that we'll probably find it hard to forget.
Oh yeah, I will certainly, and you and I witnessing it in real time. We don't yet know which way we're going to go next as far as they are concerned, but the one thing I suppose the caution does guarantee is that we're going to be even closer, those two cars, assuming that they are serviced to near perfection. We would expect nothing else from the Konica Minolta outfit and from Chip Ganassi Racing. Now, how did the debris end up on the racetrack? I don't think this particular incident is going to provide an answer to that, but the 31 car, which is now behind the wall, a gearbox failure, which means that it can only find third gear out of the box on its in-lap, and just no straight line speed whatsoever, with the revs sky high, and even the Risi Competizione Ferrari 62 nipping by on the right hand side, to give you an idea of the lack of speed for Whelen Engineering Cadillac number 31. And that car now in the garage behind the wall. Team very much still working on this car though, so they want it back into the race. There's no hint of giving up here. Everything's being done at a fast pace, but sadly, as we've remarked, it is tumbling out of contention now, and very nearly being caught by, well, take another 8 laps or so for the leading LMP2 car to catch this stationary machine. I don't think the 31 car has ever won this race, certainly not in its current guise. We've had victories for the long associated number 5 when they were both being run out of Action Express. Tracking through the years that 31 car will have taken part in this race, it looks like this one has always been missing from its CV, and it's going to remain the case into 2021. Shea Adam raising the potentially legitimate question as whether Mike Conway has ever won a 24-hour race. Well, we know to date the 24 Hours of Le Mans has been rather elusive to him, and this year is not going to be his year. The 24 Hours of Daytona just seems to pick the wrong car all the time. I mean, okay, he was up against the 8 machine with a certain Fernando Alonso driving that in 2 years of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Last year, in the September running of that event, it looked very likely that the 7 Toyota with Mike at the wheel might be able to take victory, but it wasn't to be. He is a World Endurance Champion for 2020, so we shouldn't take that away from him. But yet to win, potentially, got the facts and figures to hand, but the suggestion is that he hasn't yet won a 24-hour race, and won't do at this event either. A real shame for 31. Very little notice of that incident, and Felipe Nasr is about to be interviewed down there in front of the garage by one of the many TV crews that are here. Something that Mike Conway, some disgruntlement or disagreement with the racing gods that Mike has had perhaps in previous years. I have a funny feeling it will happen at some stage. He's got too much speed, that boy, to miss out on a 24-hour race in the whole of his career, but the 31 hasn't necessarily had the luck here either.
Consider, Johnny, it's these days with paddle shift gearboxes, it's not down to the driver to nurse the gearbox. All he can do is pull a lever. The electronics make the shift. Back in the old days when we had mechanical shifters with mechanical connections to the gearbox with a 3-pedal configuration, certainly in endurance racing, you know, it was down to the driver and how he was able to drive the car and use the gearbox. And it could be if you abused the gearbox, if you missed a gear change, if you weren't as sympathetic on the machinery, that could manifest in an issue. These days, less so. You know, Felipe Nasr is sat there, foot flat down on the throttle, and he's pulling a lever to go up the box or down the box. He's got his foot on the brake and he's clicking the other lever to go down the box. The electronics is dealing with the actual mechanisms of that gear change with the internals of the box. So it's down to the gods. And once again, the planets have not aligned for that number 31 car, and problems have befallen it. And it's just pure bad luck, really, I would say.
Yeah, and they've had plenty of it through the years at this particular event. I was suggesting that the fact that it was debris on the front straight, it could be dealt with reasonably quickly. Of course, we have to go through the sequence of pit stops though as well, but I think this is a moment that the Daytona track staff are choosing to actually clear up anything else that has been worrying them over the last 3 to 4 hours. So a chance to do a full track sweep essentially, where all the cars are bunched up on one section of the racetrack behind the safety car, and therefore it is safe for the corner workers to descend onto the Daytona asphalt. Right, here come the callers then for the next bout of pit stops. 1 or 2 deciding not to bother with this one, but the race leader certainly is. Joe, you're going to be watching these stops. Perfect run, of course, for Konica Minolta into pit stall number 1, but I make it another 6 cars following suit.
The car looked like he hit his marks, because Alexander Rossi has made the job very difficult, it looks like, for the team. He's quite close to the ball. No tyres going on though, I noticed, Johnny. Just fuel going into the Konica Minolta car, the number 10. It's done. It hasn't taken tyres. And in complete contrast, we've got tyres going onto the 01 car and fuel. Drive staying Rossi in the number 10, and in the number 01.
So that's a VP Racing Fuels pit report, and now to a VP Racing Fuels paddock report, because Stephen McAleer joins us on the line, and Joe can have a chat to him.
Hi Stephen, hopefully you can hear us. Hello Stephen. The line's dropped there, hasn't it? Sorry Johnny, we'll try again.
I didn't think that sounded like Stephen. That's I think it's personal assistant, or accurately an automated message. But we'll get Stephen McAleer to the line just as soon as we can. There's a chance, therefore, to throw the spotlight onto the GT cars in a moment or two. Back out again. Now you see, I need an accurate order for the top few cars, because Alexander Rossi's pit stall is a bit further down pit lane, and therefore he triggers the timing loop slightly later than, rather the 10 car is the first pit stall, and he triggers the timing loop slightly later than the 01, so that's not necessarily a true order, and we'll get that to you just as soon as we can. But will there be an opportunity here for the Cadillac Chip Ganassi racing car to skip ahead? I am reading it as such. 01 appears to be ahead of 60 on the road now, and the 10 car has had to slot into 3rd position. So that is time, precious time lost by Konica Minolta. And you start a pit stop in 1st, you slip back to 3rd position very quickly indeed. More track sweeping taking place on the back, on the end rather, of the back straightaway. GT cars, both from LM and Daytona, are due into the pits anytime now, with Nick Tandy leading GTLM in the best of the Corvettes from sister car driven by Jordan Taylor, 2nd of the C8s. And then it's John Edwards and Jules Gounon for BMW and Risi Competizione Ferrari, respectively, in turn ahead of Timo Glock. But the way that they are positioned behind the safety car, there's a big gap between Gounon and Glock, as it turns out, and still 9 laps, by the way, back to Jean-Marie Bruni in the WeatherTech Racing Porsche. But at least he is now right with the GTLM cars on the timing screen. Here we go then, GT Daytona time and GT LM as well. The LM's reached the pit lane first, of course, and it looks like all of the top 4 are in, Joe.
Yeah, we've got pretty much the whole of the GTLM field led in by the leading Corvettes. Nick Tandy is first in line in the silver livery Corvette, then the number 3, that's the yellow liveried Corvette, followed him in. Then we were followed in by the BMW team RLL of John Edwards, and also the Rizzi Competition Ferrari of Jules Gounon into the pits also. So the main GTLM runners all taking advantage of this yellow flag and pitting, and all very clean and tidy and pretty much back out and on their way.
So this caution has resulted in the leading GTLM cars pitting after just 14 laps, I make it. Now on a normal green flag stint, we've seen these cars reach double lap, 31 laps for Nick Tandy and his teammate Tommy Milner the stint before that. So we're well within the envelope. There'll probably be only half a tank of fuel available for the refuelers on these cars. Jules Gounon heading back into the race, and the 62 car, I notice, is now up to second place, so therefore splits the 2 Corvettes. That's good work, Joe, from Rizzi Competizione.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, but before I do, because it's gone quiet in the pit area, I just want a massive shout out to James Edmonds, who's here at the Daytona taking photographs, but also doing a bit of work for the team. He's also been a massive help to our team, because it's down to James. A lot of the interviews we've been hearing since this race started is down to James Edmonds, and I just want a personal thank you to James Edmonds, who's been a massive help to us in literally, and I kid you not, dragging drivers to their motorhome so we could speak to them on the phone, because it is so noisy in pit lane. And I really want to thank you, James. You've been a massive help. And while I'm talking, Johnny, I just wanted to pose this question: has this yellow flag put Harry Tinton, the 55, onto the lead lap in 5th place?
That is a question that I am desperately trying to answer, and we've got a number of people trying to actually provide a solution there. I think, and
it has, you know.
There's definitely a caveat here, but I think it has. I think it has. And the 55, all it needed was another caution and the opportunity to gain the lap back again. The problem is, there's still 2 minutes and 20 seconds being shown as a margin between Tincknell's car and Simon Pagenaud, and that's a large margin behind the safety car, so it's kind of in the wrong place. Now, it needs a wave-by to get the right side of the safety car, and that shall put it onto the back of Simon Pagenaud, but until that happens, I'm not sure whether I'm entirely happy with that. It's too big a margin behind the safety car. But there may still be bunching to be done. There always is after a set of pit stops. So let's wait for that to happen, and then we can have some concrete information. Wouldn't it just? They were 3 laps down.
Wouldn't that be the story of the race? The Mazda, and now I'm wanting that to happen, saw the Mazda get, and this is what I was saying earlier on, isn't it? Where you've got to get into the mindset of just plugging away and keeping going, because you've got to once you've lost time in the pits like the number 55 Mazda did, you've then got to be patient. You've then got to wait for the misfortune turning into good fortune and letting the race come to you. And you know what? The woman on the wall looking after that, the strategy of that Carlina Cade, very experienced race engineer, knew exactly that was the case, and that's what we're seeing, Johnny. This is going to be a mega final run into the flag for the next 5 hours.
Also receiving news that the number 3 is being told to overtake the 62 under the caution because of pit lane protocol. So 62, as I said, won the race visually to get ahead of the number 3, but it was judged to be an illegal release, and the cars presumably got to the end of pit lane where you are allowed to be 2 abreast, still 2 abreast into the single file section, and that meant that the 62 tucked ahead briefly, but we will be back to Corvettes 1 and 2 very, very shortly. There's a concern here, Joe, for Pfaff Motorsports, the number 9 Porsche that Laurens Vanthoor has just brought in. Surrounding brakes, I reckon, front right.
Steering. I'd say that was steering.
Oh, is it steering? Okay.
Yeah, that they're looking beyond the brake rotor, the brake disc, and they're looking at the component parts of the front suspension, and where they were looking looked like it was the tie rod to the steering rack. They're in that sort of area. And that's Shea confirming that information from the Pfaff team, that they're trying to fix their steering.
Perfect.
That was the one that Laurens Vanthoor had mentioned earlier, didn't he? They had a problem. They'd had an accident in a pit stop, and we speculated as to whether that could be them making contact with the wall, which could be the only thing that would cause a bent steering. But that's what they're trying to fix now during this yellow period.
You were quite right, by the way, about the arrival of Alexander Rossi. I said he got the easiest route into his pit stall, but he did very nearly overshoot it, and the team had to inch him back into position. I missed that at the time. When I say perfect, not perfect for Pfaff Motorsport, merely in the fact that we were getting exactly the same message from Joe and from Shea about the steering needing to be rectified. So it means we're on the money in terms of their latest predicament. We're about to go for a restart here. Hopefully all the GT LM cars are now in the right order, with Jordan Taylor being told by race control to get ahead of Jules Gounon, and we'll confirm whether that's happening in a moment or two. But back to green we go, with 5 hours and 12 minutes still to elapse at the Daytona 24 Hours for 2021, and the DPIs waste no time at all in getting 2 abreast. Actually the DPI trying to unravel itself on an LMP2 car, quite possibly, as the top 4 in DPI are nose to tail, and they run as follows: Alexander Rossi, Kevin Magnussen, Juan Pablo Montoya now installed into the 60 machine, and he's lost a place already to Simon Pagenaud in the Ally Cadillac racing car. So that might have actually been Pagenaud and Montoya side by side at turn 2, and it was Pagenaud getting the place and catching Montoya just a little bit sleeping into turn 1 and 2. Also coolish tyres need to be a concern as well, as temperature is steadily building on this next lap. Up onto the high banks goes the scrap for GT Daytona. It's led by Philip Ellis for Winward Racing in a Mercedes. Then Nicholas Nielsen in the AF Corsa Ferrari, and the Paul Miller Racing Lamborghini for Madison Snow in the number 1 car is currently 3rd. He's ahead of Patrick Long for Wright, and Lucas Stoltz for Sun Energy 1, the Gradient Racing prepared Sun Energy 1 car number 75. Out of Speedway turn 4 come the race leaders, and through the tri-oval, Rossi, Magnussen, Simon Pagenaud doing the chasing. And this is exactly what we wanted. Joe Bradley joining me, Johnny Palmer, in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre. We mightily enjoyed this battle between Rossi and Magnussen prior to the yellow, and we've got exactly the same again, plus a Simon Pagenaud on their tail now.
Yeah, let's just throw in another IndyCar champion, shall we, and see what we get. Look at this fantastic racing onto the infield, through the kink and towards the western hairpin. It's absolute. It's nose to tail. Rossi in the 10th. There's even one of Magnussen's second, third is Pagenaud. As the cars come out of that hairpin, head down to that very tricky left-hand turn. Have to maximise your momentum through this. Get on the power, nurse that throttle to get the maximum traction out of there. And now it's a drag race. And Magnussen goes low on the banking and goes inside of Rossi, as it's a race now side by side through the banking turns of Speedway 1 and 2 and down the back straight, and it looks like Magnussen has got the edge, and he's certainly got that advantage of the inside line, and roles have been reversed, and round the outside is trying Rossi, but Magnussen makes it stick into and out of the bus stop chicane. The question is, will Magnussen switch those tyres on first? He put that car onto new tyres in the pit stop, whereas Rossi stayed on the old set, and this is what we're going to see. Magnussen now an advantage of new rubber.
That is exactly the overtake he wanted to pull off. the previous stint into the bus stop, but couldn't do it because only was given the outside line by Alexander Rossi. Fantastic driving off Speedway 2 to give him the inside line, but I was impressed by the accurate straight line speed, and I thought Rossi might have had an opportunity to defend from the outside there. In the end, it didn't turn out like that. Great car placement from Danish driver Kevin Magnussen, and he just turned in at the perfect point to make sure that Rossi couldn't do likewise.
It was the traction out of the left-hander onto the banking where Magnussen had a little bit more grip that enabled him to get the momentum to get alongside Rossi into the first part of that banking through Speedway 1 and maintain that momentum all the way through Speedway 2 and onto the back straight where he really did extend that lead. And now look at the gap as they go back out that same part of the track as what I've just been describing. Magnussen has pulled out probably a 10-car gap now between his Cadillac Chip Ganassi racing car and the front of the Minolta Acura as they went out there onto the back straight once more, and it's Magnussen very much into a solid lead, I would say, JP.
I have to say, it's phenomenal rotation that Kevin Magnussen is getting from that Cadillac through turn 6, which is the corner you're talking about. You've taught me a little bit about the importance of getting the car turned as quickly as possible in our sort of one day of karting that we get when we go to racetracks. And that solid axle that you get on a go-kart, it's very different technology utilised in these cars, but it is about getting the car pointed in the right direction as early as possible and then getting the power off the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit different in these cars, but they have got, which is for, a limited slip diff and the diff settings to give them the different way that the differential works across the rear axle. So it's very, very similar to what I was trying to get across to you on a card, Johnny. And Magnussen, being the type of driver he is, he will want, and I think Rossi's in the same category, really. These guys like a car that is pointy at the front end and has the rear end around. And once the car is pointing in the direction you need, then that's the momentum that you want, and the car will punch out in the corner. And none more so than that sweeping left-hander onto the banking for Speedway turns 1 and Speedway turns 2. It's all about keeping the momentum of that car up, and the traction out of that corner is all important.
Plenty happening elsewhere in the race, as you would expect, right after a caution and a safety car, of course. There's been a lead change in LMP2 with Ryan Dalziel for Era Motorsport now to the sharp end to overtake Tim Bourret. Christopher Mies is in 3rd position, and in GT Daytona, Patrick Long had got up to 3rd position. Lucas Stoltz, though, flirting with that spot as well in the Sun Energy 1 Mercedes. Ellis leads the class, Nielsen 2nd, and then, pretty much even Stevens 3rd and 4th for Stoltz and for Long. There's been a problem, though, with the pit stop, hasn't there, for 0-1? You and I treated to what had happened in the pit stop a moment or two ago, and this looks suspiciously like a drive-through now for Kevin Magnussen.
A bit of a story spoiler as Magnussen comes into the pits to take a drive-through, and the reason he's been given a drive-through, he had wheel rotation whilst the car was still on the jack stands. It's just a minuscule amount of mistiming there from Kevin Magnussen. The car was still on the stands, about to be dropped when he put the car in gear and let the clutch out, basically, and that made the rear axle spin up. That's not allowed in the regulations for safety reasons. It's quite logical and it's a good rule, but Kevin Magnussen is paying that penalty now, and he's going to be dropped. He's dropped right off the lead. He's in the GTLM line there, and in fact, he might even be into GTD line and having to make his way through traffic. That's going to delay him trying to get back on terms with the leading pack.
A real shame. Not least for us enjoying that battle to this point, but I have a funny feeling that those cars will find each other a little bit later on in the piece. Maybe not with Rossi and Magnussen as the drivers, but they put a brilliant show on, and I don't think you can ever take that overtake away from us. Both the aborted one, when Magnussen tried to go around the outside into the bus stop, and then when he finally did pull it off on the inside of Alexander Rossi. Two fabulous memories from this year's Daytona, and that will be difficult to forget. And we're still left with 2 cars out front, by the way, because now Rossi has a different liveried Cadillac in his rear-view mirror. This time it's Simon Pagenaud for Ally Cadillac Racing and another 48 car. And only a second adrift of those 2 is Juan Pablo Montoya for Meyer Shank Racing. So still plenty of entertainment out front. Magnussen will slot back into 4th position. So he's still ahead of Jonathan Bomarito, who incidentally is very definitely now onto the lead lap for the Mazda DPI squad. So Harry Tincknell switched to Jonathan Bomarito in the last pit stop. And the 2 minutes that I was concerned about was just the extent of the safety car train. In fact, it was taking that long for the cars to go through the timing loop, and that was the differential at much slower speed. And it is condensed now to, well, 55 seconds from race leader Rossi back to J-Bomb, but onto the lead lap, and you can really attack the race from there. This is not done and dusted as far as Mazda are concerned. And speaking of which, we are very close now to a 19th hour of this year's race being completed, and therefore right here on RS2 IMSA Radio, where we're bringing you live coverage of the 59th edition of the Rolex 24 at Daytona. It is time for a Mazda in-race update. That sees Alexander Rossi leading after 632 laps for the Konica Minolta Acura squad in car number 10. Just that half-second advantage. Blinken, you'll miss the 2 that lead the race as they cross the line through the tri-oval. They're just exiting turn 2 now and heading onto the infield proper. Simon Pagenaud in hot pursuit then in the first of the Cadillacs for Ally Cadillac Racing. That's car 48. And then Juan Pablo Montoya in the pink and purple and black number 60 car for Meyer Shank Racing with Curb Agajanian in their Acura ARX05. So 3rd place for Juan Pablo, 4th place for a recovering Kevin Magnussen after the drive-through penalty, after his rear wheels were spotted rotating before they had made contact with the ground once again. Jonathan Bomarito running around in 5th, but back to the lead lap. And this is where there's more changes that have happened, because in LMP2, the 18 Ryan DL Era Motorsport Orica leads the class now, and Christopher Mies is up to 2nd place for Dragon Speed, having got by Tim Bourret in the opening exchanges of this particular stint. He's built himself a 2-second advantage now over the Frenchman. That's 18, 82 and the 8 cars then, 1st, 2nd and 3rd in LMP2. Sadly, the number 31 car is still in the pits, having all of that work done on its gearbox. It got stuck in 3rd gear, did the Wheel and Engineering Cadillac, and the car that has had terrible luck at this race through the years. Looks like it is following, the bad luck is following that car once again in 2021. It's not out of the race yet, but it is out of contention. 4th place in the LMP2 category is the 51 car of Austin Dillon, and then it is the 11 machine of Thomas Merrill, in the number 11 Win Autosport car. GTLM, led by Nick Tandy for Corvette in the first of the C8Rs from Jordan Taylor. Only 0.8 of a second between those 2. Jesse Krohn for BMW runs 3rd in the black number 24, and Jules Gounon, having made his way up to 2nd, coming out of the last phase of pit stops. It was determined that he jumped line coming out of pit road and should have in fact tucked in behind the 2nd of the Corvettes, but chose to split them and then was given the instruction to reverse those positions. Since then, Jules Gounon from Risi Competizione has slipped to 4th place, with Bruno Spengler in 5th. In LMP3, Scott Andrews leads the category in the 74 Riley Motorsports Ligier. 2nd place is Wade Boyd for Sean Creech Motorsport, and 3rd in LMP3, although losing places on some GT Daytona cars, Moritz Krantz for Ullner Motorsports. And the top 5 in GT Daytona, Philip Ellis leads for Windward Racing with their Mercedes 57. The 21 Nicholas Nielsen Ferrari from AF Corsa 2nd. Lucas Stoltz, number 75, Sun Energy 1 Mercedes is 3rd. It's a Porsche next, the Patrick Long-driven Wright Motorsports Porsche number 16. And Madison Snow, race winner here last year, car number 1 for Paul Miller Racing, is running in 5th. That's the latest Mazda in-race update right here on IMSA Radio. wonderful sound in the background of Simon Pagenaud's Cadillac V8 as it heads then into the international horseshoe. Alexander Rossi right up ahead of it. He's just keeping pace with Rossi right now. There's no real advantage for either of those cars, I would say. And happy to stay in the low 136s. They've got quite a lot of traffic to deal with right now. All of the GT traffic is well and truly bunched up, of course, after all the cars exited the latest caution period. I'm sure I gave you the total time for that, which was originally thrown for debris, but there was quite a bit of track maintenance able to be done at the same time. It was 17 minutes, which is about the same as the last few cautions we've had, actually. Generally less than 20 minutes, but it was one of the quicker ones, considering we had virtually all of the pit stops cycled through, and reordering of cars as well, set for a restart. Prime time for the track to be swept where it needed to be. Juan Pablo Montoya in third position. Yes, Joe, you're joining me in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre.
Information coming in, this is really clever, information coming in from Jeroen Bleekemolen, who's actually at the wheel of the 91 Rally Motorsports League, currently running fourth in the LMP3 class. Now, this car was 7 laps off the car ahead, which just happens to be the manufacturer of the kid. And that car on 48 laps. They were 7 laps off that car earlier today. They're now only within about a lap and a half. And Jeroen just absolutely enthusing about being able to drive this car and being able to push. He mentions how there's no balance of performance in the LMP3 class, and he can just drive this car pure in a pure races form and just push all the way. And he's really relishing this chase down. I know it's a little bit spaced out, the LMP3 battle, but it's still a battle to keep your eyes on. These cars, 25th for the number 6 Milner Motorsports to Kane. Mike Grant's at the wheel of that in 25th overall, and then Bleekemolen in 32nd spot overall, but only a lap and a half between the Rally Motorsports car and the Milner Motorsports car. So a race for the final step of the podium in LMP3 beginning to shape up.
Also looking lively from third position in GT Daytona is Lucas Stoltz, just producing a 146.9, which is quicker than the 2 cars ahead of him on the road. Philip Ellis, the German-born and I think now based Brit, runs with the Union flag on the belt buckle, but I think he was born in Munich and spends a lot of his time racing around the Nürburgring at Nordschleife, but a lot of his close family come from the UK. Nicholas Nielsen, very much Danish, and a stalwart in Ferrari Cup racing in the Ferrari Challenge Europe. Won one of the big finals organised in that championship towards the end of probably 3 seasons ago now, but that put him into the right area to be picked up by AF Corsa and become as one of those sneaky silvers that you can run in a 4-hour European Le Mans Series event. Went on to win the ELMS for a team called Lusich Racing, and now well established in AF Corsa land, running with their number 21 car, joining Matteo Cressoni, Simon Mann and Daniel Serra. Very strong lineup indeed there. Matteo Cressoni has really impressed me. Led the race on a couple of occasions in GT Daytona. I knew he was good, but he's possibly stepped up even more of a level for me this weekend, considering who he's been able to race and outpace a lot of the time. But Lucas Stoltz, more pace being produced by the German than those 2 cars ahead, so we can look forward to the gap closing yet further. Top 3 in Daytona spread by 1.2, 1.3 seconds. It's altering very slightly lap on lap. So it is 10:46 at Daytona, and just under 5 hours of the race still to go. Still arguably a bit too far out to be properly back timing the event. I'm sure the spreadsheet's been open in order to do that from the start of the race pretty much, but there are one or two twists and turns still for the race to deliver, I'm sure. Ross Gunn rather tentative as to the order of the drivers for his car to the end of the flag. I think at the end of the race, rather, to the flag. I think he was deliberately keeping his cars close to his chest. The relevant drivers will be well and truly mapped out for the final few stints. They will have worked out who's the quickest in the quartet, or in some cases the trio. And the driver will have been named already for the final, probably a couple of stints to the finish. But you need somebody quick behind the wheel of your car if there is a late caution. We're almost guaranteed a flat-out race somewhere in that final hour, maybe with a caution. Potential for a slight extension as well. The white flag coming out to indicate the final lap, and then the run to the checker. As into turn 6 goes the 4th placed 0-1 car of Kevin Magnussen. Again, great drive off turn 6. This is, as Joe quite rightly suggested, where the car was very strong in that fight against Alexander Rossi. The problem, though, now for Magnussen after the drive-through is that it's putting him closer to the Mazda, if anything, of Jonathan Bomarito behind than the lead of the race, which is a good 37 seconds out of touch now for Chip Ganassi Racing. There'll be another caution, so it shouldn't be a huge drama. That will condense the field once again, and they'll have another stab at it, as will pretty much all of those 5 cars. 31's back into the race. I'm sure we mentioned that, Joe, but gearbox troubles forced it behind the wall, and I'm noticing that Felipe Nasser has rejoined, so the car now running around in 10th position and having to deal with LMP2 traffic. Talking a moment or two ago about the LMP3 scrap. Scott Andrews piloting the Riley Motorsports Ligier. 2 laps, a very comfortable margin over Wayne Boyd's Sean Creech Motorsport car. How crowded is the house into the West Horseshoe, though? At 75 is Lucas Stoltz, who's got ahead of Nicholas Nielsen. We were threatening that that might be the case, and the Sun Energy 1 car, with an awful lot of hard work being done by Gradient Racing to prepare that car, of course, now getting some reward by jumping ahead of the 21 of Nicholas Nielsen. Got it done on the infield just before the left-hander at turn 6, and in sight is the 57 Winward Racing machine of Philip Ellis as well, with prototype cars moving left and right, trying to get heat, I think, in the tyres, or was that just an LMP2 car just trying to work out where do I need to be on the road as we head for the bus stop?
How do you pick your way through that, Johnny? You know what, that's got to be seen as an opportunity to make up time and make up ground on the cars ahead of you by picking your way and making a definite path through all of that slower traffic. Great driving from Madison.
Battling away with Nicholas Nielsen, who is also, I should remind you, a factory Ferrari GT driver, having joined the roster relatively recently, but at the same time as Daniel Serra, so he's been in the sort of latest signings for AF Corse / Ferrari. AF Corse not strictly the factory team for Ferrari, but it is as good as. They kind of run these cars on behalf of the great Mark, and you'd be hard pushed to prepare a Ferrari as well and as fast as AF Corse do. You can sometimes match them, but very rarely are they outbeaten. No surprise therefore for their livery to be adorned on the number 21 car, and for it to be doing so well in the order, by the way. It's now back ahead of Lucas Stoltz. But this is all down to where the traffic's falling as well, using that traffic to give it the opportunity for the infield battling. Right, a chance now to head to another VP Racing Fuels pit and paddock report, because Mike Conway joins us on the line. I'm sorry, Mike, that it is not happier times we can have a chat to you on IMSA Radio. We've been scratching our heads you and 24-hour races? They just seem to elude you at this point in your career.
Yeah. I mean, looking at gear, I think we were losing a bit of pace. I think it was down to the manifold that broke. We had the manifold at the time, and then we had the gearbox. We instantly lost fourth gear, so we kind of had to figure out why that happened. But yeah, real game. I felt like we had a chance to be there at the end and fight for it, but yeah, not to be.
Is it a case that one problem caused the next one and then the next one, or they've been entirely separate issues?
We're not sure yet, but it could be related because of all the extra hot air that was flying around in the back end. It could have affected some of the cables or something like that. That affected the optics. So it's a possibility it's linked, but we have to investigate a little bit after, I think.
We were talking about gearbox problems of yesteryear, whereby it's down to the driver, but I mean there are so many electronics involved in a gear change these days. Your job is just to keep your foot flat to the floor and pull another gear and hope the thing works, and you're entirely reliant on the makeup of the electronics there.
Exactly, yeah, I mean you can't go too wrong in terms of going up and down the gearbox. It will deny short distribution too early, things like that. So there's lots of systems in place which is pretty good. But yeah, unfortunately the last 2 years now, there's lots of problems of close out break. So yeah, real shame. I thought this year might have been our year, starting off so strong. But you know, we've still got 6 cars, still in the fight, we've still got 48, and really good race the whole time. So we're going to root for them now and hopefully bring up our home.
Mike, the line's not great to you, but we really appreciate you taking a few moments to just give us the update. I wanted to talk Toyota, but that can wait for another day. The movement from the hypercar Toyota looking very exciting indeed. Saw some footage of those cars testing around Portimao, and I'm desperate for that season to get started now. It will start at Portimao, as we've learned, and you'll be very much part of that campaign. So I'll look forward to that. We'll do that chat some other time, but safe journeying to get back to the UK.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Mike Conway joining us here on RS2 IMSA Radio. Apologies for the difficulty in the line there. Been very solid until now, and Mike not in clearly a positive mood necessarily. No, I think he probably was, but dealing with more disappointment sadly from this race. I can't believe the bad form that 31 car has had through the years as well. I still maintain that car has never won around here through 24 hours, and they'll have to wait for another year as well. We're verging on the point where we're going to have another shift change in the Haggerty Global Broadcast Centre, by the way. Welcome back, John Hindhaugh, to the broadcast.
Johnny Palmer, good morning. Good morning. Well, you know, we left you a nice, exciting race, and for the most part, you haven't broken it. You've managed to keep it together. Thank you very much.
Well, see, Joe Bradley and I were blamed for crashing all the Matchbox cars at Dubai, so we've been mindful to be very much on our best behaviour 2 weeks later. And well, what we have been providing is some fabulous overtakes, whether they didn't quite work for Kevin Magnussen first time around, and then he definitely did for one of the overtakes of the race so far. It's just a real shame that K-Mag was at fault with the wheels spinning in the pit stop, and that's taken him a little bit out of contention now. But the Mazda's back in the fight. We said it might be able to recover 2 of the 3 laps. All 3 now are back, and the 55's on the lead lap. Could still get a good result here. J-Bomb currently driving, John.
What a story that would be. And by the way, the Mike Conway, you're right, Mike didn't sound good. He was actually standing in one of the BA speakers on the pit wall, and the BA is so efficient at Daytona that I think we were hearing ourselves and himself back, which is what was overwhelming his form. But no, the Mazda is a magnificent story. remember that car, JP, didn't want to engage first gear to pull out onto the warm-up lap, for goodness sake. And here we are with under 5 hours to go, and it's legitimately now back in the fight at just over a minute behind the leaders. Yeah, all right, it's in some respects has not been the tidiest race with 10 full course yellows, full course cautions, but that said, the racing again has been absolutely outstanding. I remember I was listening to you and Joe when the Mazda got back on the lead lap, and that's one of those, oh, we really kind of don't want to say anything about this because it might ruin the fairing story of it, you know, as if by saying it we were gonna spoil it. But that's exactly where we are right now in this story, this book that's not yet finished, which is what Johnny Palmer, a 24-hour race always is. You can't skip to the end and the last chapter, the last few pages, because somebody is still scribbling away trying to work out what the twist to the plot will be.